And Shakura and Nick, just to let you know, Chantel is joining us tonight, but will be joining a few minutes late as soon as she's able to join. Good evening and welcome to the March board meeting of the DC Public Charter School Board. My name is Leah Cruzy and I am the board chair. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone joining us this evening, especially to those who may not regularly attend our board meetings, whether you are a student, a parent or family member of a student in a charter school, an educator or administrator, a charter school board member, or member of the public interested in a particular item on tonight's agenda. Tonight, I am joined by my fellow board members, Vice Chair Jim Sandman, Secretary Shakura Adamathanian, Carissa Stanley Beatty, and board member Nick Rodriguez. Treasurer Chantel Wright will be joining us in a few minutes. For those of you who are new tonight, I'd like to give a brief overview of who we are, what DC PCSB does, and what these meetings are about. Those sitting beside me here, a few of whom are zooming in remotely, are volunteer members of a 7-person appointed board who together govern the agency called the DC Public Charter School Board. We work together with our agency's executive director, Dr. Michelle Walker-Davis, to implement its policies and practices. DC PCSB is an independent government agency of the District of Columbia and is the sole authorizer of public charter schools in the district. Independent means that we have a different budget and governance model than other city agencies. For example, we do not receive an appropriation from the DC city government in order to run. Rather, our revenue comes from an administrative fee that we are authorized to draw from public charter schools to do our very important work. A public charter school is a public school established by teachers, parents, or community groups under the terms of a charter approved by its authorizer. A charter school authorizer, in DC, that is us, is the entity that decides who can start a new charter school, sets academic and operational expectations for those schools, and as you will hear tonight, it is the entity that evaluates school performance. Authorizers also decide whether a charter should remain open or close at the end of its contract or earlier if that's determined. Our manner and method of considering new school openings is nationally recognized for its rigor. I encourage anyone interested to spend time on our website to learn more about our standard of approval for a new charter, as well as decisions this board has made in the past to award or deny an applicant, including why. The content of our board meetings each month generally includes an amendment to a charter for any number of matters, perhaps to adjust how a goal is measured, what assessment a school uses to measure learning outcomes or progress, to address matters related to moving to a new facility or to change its address. It may also include an opportunity to share with the public and to seek and receive feedback on a change to one of our policies. This level of elevated transparency in how schools are serving its students is unique. We are proud to model good governance in this way. Our vision as an agency is to ensure that every DC student receives a quality education that makes them feel valued and prepares them for lifelong learning, a fulfilling career, and economic stability. Our work is in service to the students and families who navigate our city's choice system, some of whom attend a DCPS school and then a charter school, and then move from that public charter school into another school, whether DCPS, charter, or sometimes even private school. Some of our students are in pre-K 3 and pre-K 4. Some are in K through 12, and some are more seasoned grown-ups returning to education after having taken a different pathway. We are so fortunate to have these options in the District of Columbia, and I am proud of the city government that for years has celebrated that diversity by not insisting a system of schools must fit into a cookie-cutter, one-size-fits-all criteria, but instead has made government responsive to the needs and realities of communities. As part of our commitment to create a portfolio of excellent schools and building enduring partnerships and an effective organization in our oversight work for the district, this board engages in a two-way process with community stakeholders. We use these monthly board meetings to hold space to hear from the public on all topics, and we focus specifically on the agenda for that meeting. Public comment is an opportunity for us to hear the public's thoughts, opinions, and receive feedback through written statements, audio, and live testimony. We review the written and audio testimony and actively listen to testimony before us. Because of the pandemic and the changing work and travel behavior from that, our meetings are still in hybrid or are occasionally fully virtual over Zoom. Because of that different viewing and participation experience, you may see us looking down from time to time during public comment. That's going to mean that we're processing what we're hearing by taking notes. So tonight, here's what will be the same and what will be different. What will be the same is the format and the sequence. In a moment, I will hand the virtual mic to Dr. Walker Davis, the DC PCSB's Executive Director, who will also offer some opening remarks. Then we will open for public comment and welcome to the virtual mic those who have pre-registered to offer public comment. I'll remind everyone who may not have registered how they can submit comments by multiple methods. In an interest of time, as it is a school night and we have a full agenda this evening, we will ask commenters to limit their remarks to 2 minutes. Public officials are invited to speak for up to 5. Now, here's what may feel different. Traditionally, our practice has not been to interact with commenters made during the meeting, but staff have followed up as necessary to make sure comments are understood, clarified, and addressed as feasible and as needed. Tonight, we're going to give some engagement a try. At a minimum, I may thank and acknowledge our speakers. It's important to me to acknowledge the dignity and humanity of those who come before us. And as someone who doesn't really enjoy public speaking, it is important to me that you know that we deeply value and respect those who take the time and make themselves vulnerable to come before us. I also want to create the space for myself and fellow members of the board to ask questions, perhaps probing, perhaps clarifying of commenters. My second intention with this is to ensure that this body is getting as complete a picture as possible that we can get of a situation to inform decisions that we make. The staff of DC PCSB do an excellent job through process and policy to present us with recommendations that consider a wide range of factors, but it can also be illuminating to hear directly from stakeholders their opinion, which sometimes needs clarification. So tonight is one of 2 dedicated opportunities for our board to hear from the public about our revised accountability framework, which we are calling ASPIRE, to get questions and feedback on the ASPIRE policy and technical guide. There are 5 frameworks. These vary by program model and grade span, so we can focus on each of these frameworks individually. I will be calling the names of those who've signed up to testify related to that particular ASPIRE framework that they want to comment on. The public comment tonight will be available for public viewing in multiple places, in the written record or transcript of tonight's meeting, as well as in the final board memo that will be made available prior to the June 10th board meeting. I'll be honest, I'm not exactly sure how it'll go, and I can't promise we'll continue it exactly like this. My hope is that the exercise is productive and gives us and witnesses who come before us confidence that the decisions we make are fully informed, all in service to the students of the District of Columbia. My ask of you is that you give me some grace as I try this tonight, and that you work with us as we work toward improvement in how we do this. Thank you. And with that, I'll pass the mic to Dr. Walker Davis.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy, and good evening, board members and our viewing public. As Chair Cruzy outlined, we value multiple perspectives, and those perspectives come to us in a lot of different ways. They come through public comment, whether that be in writing, by audio, or through individuals testifying at our monthly board meetings like this one. But those perspectives also come through community engagement, which is one important way we and schools interact with residents and community leaders throughout the city. Engagement means a lot of different things to different people, and there are so many ways to describe what engagement is. But at its core, I believe that community engagement is educating, consulting, communicating, and partnering. It's a two-way process with community leaders, school leaders, caregivers, parents, district leaders, council members, ANCs, and more. We do it here at PCSB, and we also expect public charter schools to take a similar approach. So tonight, we truly want to hear from you on two different subjects during the public hearing. The first is about the proposed Aspire system, which I will tell you more about after public comment. And the second is about a facility request from the DC Wildflower Public Charter School. During the public hearing, the board will also vote on facility requests from Washington Latin Public Charter School and Bethune Public Charter School. I'll be back again later this evening to share some more detail about our Aspire framework, but I did want to welcome all of those who are going to navigate a slightly different public comment with us this evening. Thank you, Chair Kruse.
Thank you, Dr. Walker-Davis. Next, we will hear from our registered public comment speakers. At the beginning of every monthly meeting, the DC Public Charter School Board will hear public testimony related to items on the agenda, and we will listen to roughly 10 minutes of testimony for topics not related to any agenda items. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to testify, and if you need to make a few additional points, please email your testimony to us for us to be read to public.comment@dcpcsb.org. Public officials who sign up to testify will be allowed to speak for up to 5 minutes. The hand raising feature has been disabled. We're trying a new approach to public comment this evening, and for that, I'll call individuals who signed up to testify based on the topic identified at the time of signing up. As a reminder, all written public comment is available to the public on our website, and if you'd like to register to provide live testimony or submit a written comment to the board, you can find all testimony registration and submission information on our website under the Public Comment tab at dcpcsb.org. You can also submit your comments to public.comment@dcpcsb.org or call our public comment line to leave a voicemail testimony at 202-328-2660 and select option 2. As we move through each speaker, Aisha, our Zoom host for the evening, will promote each speaker from the attendee pool and unmute individuals for speaking. So, let us now hear from the 12 witnesses who have signed up to speak this evening, and we'll begin by hearing about the proposed Aspire framework. For that, I'd like to invite to testify before the board, Shannon Hodge. And Shannon, you will have up to 2 minutes to speak. I think I saw Shannon a moment ago. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Shannon Hodge, and I'm the president of KIPP DC Public Schools. I'm here tonight to provide public comment on the Aspire framework, which holds the potential to take charter school accountability and performance to the next level with a deliberate and thoughtful focus on equity and ensuring high quality options for students and families who choose public charter schools in DC. First, I commend the board, staff, and all involved for your commitment to highlighting and enhancing school quality through Aspire. Your efforts to create a more nuanced and comprehensive accountability system are both needed and appreciated. At the same time, I urge the board to consider the 24-25 school year as a genuine pilot year for Aspire's implementation. Schools expected an opportunity to have a full year to understand and practice Aspire before results were published and consequences attached. We did not receive that this year, and the current technical guide only partially provides for it next year. A pilot year is more than just a trial. It's an opportunity for us to fully integrate and understand the framework within our school's educational and operational context. By having a full pilot year, we will be able to ensure understanding of and alignment with the framework's requirements. Furthermore, a pilot year will allow DC PCSB to refine its data collection and analysis processes. This period of refinement is crucial for identifying potential issues and ensuring that the data we rely on to make decisions are both accurate and meaningful. Most importantly, making the next school year a pilot period ensures that you can launch the framework in its complete form, including the integration of school-selected metrics. These metrics are vital as they allow schools to highlight their unique contributions and context, enriching the Aspire framework with a level of customization that standard metrics cannot capture. By designating the 24-25 school year as a pilot year for Aspire, you would give both schools and your staff the time and space to fully understand and integrate this framework, ensuring it functions as intended. This approach not only respects the complexities of educational accountability, but also honors the individuality of our schools and the communities they serve. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate your testimony here tonight. And what I hear from you is a request for a full pilot year.
Yes.
We have another commenter coming on tonight, but I wanted to first invite the opportunity. Welcome, Treasurer Chantel. If any other board members who'd like to follow up with any clarifying questions or program questions.
Hi, Shannon. Thank you for your testimony. Can you clarify for us? You said that you don't feel like this year was an opportunity to kind of pilot how schools will perform on Aspire. I know that the staff did send out likely outcomes based off of this year's data. Can you tell us why? What would be different if next year were a pilot year versus what took place this year?
Sure. So I think there are a few things, and I appreciate the question. I think there are a few things. One is that the framework would be more or less finalized, and schools would have a full year to see how it plays out in their schools, to be able to plan for that and to make decisions related to that. So we are still, from my understanding, experiencing changes to the framework, getting updated data, getting updated metrics, even as of the middle of last week, which is not what we expected in a pilot year. I think another major difference would be a pilot year would give you a chance to say both the data would not be published from that year, nor would consequences apply to LEAs for data from that year, as your LEA was attempting to use the framework for the first time and see how it played out in schools. As I currently understand it, the data from next school year would not be published, but those data might be used, and that actually might be wrong too. I can't remember. But the point would be that next year's data would neither be published nor consequences attached to it if it were a full pilot. We haven't had that opportunity at schools, and that is one that we should have.
Okay, maybe the staff will clarify a little later, but it's my understanding that the next year is meant to be what has historically, when we've rolled out frameworks, been a hold harmless year. And then the following year, consequences attached. I would ask Dr. Walker Davis and her team to be ready to clarify that difference. And so what I'm hearing, I just want to make sure I hear your request. You're asking for a pilot year, a hold harmless year, and then implementation. So you're talking about 3 years from now before the framework went into effect?
I would be asking that data from school year 24-25 neither be published nor have consequences attached to it. So that would be hold harmless. But that data from 25-26, which as I understand would also be the first year that the school selected metrics would actually be included in the framework, be the year that the data count, for lack of a better term. So both published and consequences attached.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. And so you know, we will be having members of the staff that are working much more closely with Aspire joining later on in the board meeting, and we'll have a chance to kind of process some of the questions that are coming in now and the comments that are coming in now at that point. So what I may do next is invite up our next speaker, and we'll take in the comments, and we want you to stay nearby, Shannon, and Elise as well after this, stand nearby, but we may not follow up with direct questions right after you finish speaking. We'll do it at the completion of this particular panel. So welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Elise Graham, and I'm proud to speak to you as a member of the Washington Latin Board of Governors and chair of its academic committee on the topic of the proposed Aspire framework. We at Latin strongly support accountability and high expectations for all of our students, and we're grateful to the PCSB for its hard work to develop a framework aligned to those values. Indeed, I, along with other fellow Latin board members, have closely followed the PCSB staff's work in this regard. Last summer, we met with Kirsten James. We attended the all-board breakfast with you, Chair Crucy, and with Dr. Walker Davis. And we stayed afterwards in conversation with Dr. Walker Davis to deepen our understanding. And we thank you very much for those opportunities to learn more. We have since had several board and committee meetings devoted to understanding and modeling the framework. So we at Latin are supportive and we're deeply engaged. And we too, before you adopt the framework, want to urge you to grant the framework the full pilot year. in school year 24-25. I'll leave it to the school leaders to speak more fully to the points that Ms. Hodges just made about data and about the timing. One thing I want to mention that's really important to Latin as a mission-driven school, very specifically mission-driven, is that the mission-specific goals will not be included in the framework next year. And that's another important reason, I think, to hold off to extend the pilot year. An accountability framework should not just tell the stories of where schools fail to meet the bar. It should reflect the impactful work that schools like Latin do every day in fulfillment of their mission. Just with respect to those challenges, in our conversation last summer, Ms. Walker-Davis anticipated the possibility for challenges like those that we've faced in the last 9 months. And I think wisely gave the answer to us at the time that one answer to that would be to extend the pilot period. And that was very reassuring to our board. So we consider this a highly, highly complex framework, and it's a major once in a decade or more reboot of it. So getting it right and understanding it well isn't just critical to you, the PCSB board, and to our school leaders. We really want you to consider the 69 LEA charter boards and their academic committees, whose job it is, like yours, to help hold our schools accountable. To do our jobs responsibly, we need a full year of reliable data, work with the model, and frankly, just understanding a lot of the detail, to be able to understand it and communicate it, and really importantly, to validate and support it in each of our communities. At Latin, it's critical to explain to our parents, but in a year where we're seeking to open a second campus, we also need to explain it to our lenders, funders, and community members who are asking for help with that expansion. So we understand the urgency to have a framework in place, and we hope you'll proceed with the planned implementation in June. We think that that implementation can still be subject to another pilot year, and we urge you to prioritize, not to prioritize done over done right. We hope you'll give a full and proper pilot year so that this can be a robust and reliable framework for our students and that the sector deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. So please stay nearby. We appreciate your testimony, and we will have some follow-up questions for this full group in a few minutes.
I apologize, Leah. I'm sorry. So I was supposed to wait until everybody.
Not your fault. I invited it in. This is me learning.
Okay.
So we are going to have, so I appreciate that, Shannon, that was already a helpful back and forth, but I want to make sure we get the full suite of the testimony in for the full panel. So next, Peter Anderson, welcome. It's nice to see you this evening.
Good evening. My name is Peter Anderson. I'm the head of schools and CEO for Washington Latin and a Ward 5 resident. I want to thank PCSB board members and staff for your commitment to enhancing our educational accountability framework. As advocates for our students and schools, it's crucial to ensure that we approach this challenge with precision and foresight. Given the complexities of education in our evolving world, designating school year 24-25 as a genuine pilot year, as you heard before, is imperative. We must recognize that unforeseen delays and technical guide dissemination issues have hindered the current year's viability as a trial period. Implementing a pilot year will allow for thorough testing of our data processes and integration, as you heard before, of mission-specific goals from the outset, which we believe are fundamental elements for accurate school evaluation. As a school engaged in significant construction efforts requiring extensive fundraising and engagement with various lending institutions, we're acutely aware of the limited understanding of our sector as is. The new framework exacerbates our messaging challenge. A robust communication plan is essential to navigate this transition effectively and prevent adverse outcomes like increased borrowing costs or decreased investment. A pilot year can facilitate this, allowing more time for collaboration between the PCSB communications team and LEAs. It's crucial to note that our current framework falls short, and I would be remiss if I didn't say this, in measuring or incentivizing the true purpose of education, the holistic thriving of our students. Where college and career readiness remain critical, I believe that we must broaden our accountability measures to encompass social emotional learning, student well-being, teacher satisfaction, civic engagement, lifelong learning, and others. But I'm not going to belabor that point. But I do want to say that we operate within a broader context. as the OSCE report card already captures a wide spectrum of metrics. Our PCSB framework should offer a nuanced assessment reflecting the diversity and innovation inherent in our schools, rather than replicating existing measures. That's why waiting till we have the mission-specific goals is so critical, because it's really the one thing that really truly differentiates this framework from what OSCE is already doing. While high accountability standards are essential, our path forward must be deliberate and reflective of our community's needs. Let's embrace a pilot year that allows for calibration and reflection, leading with intention and insight for the betterment of our students. Thank you for your continued dedication and commitment to our shared mission.
Thank you, Peter. Don't go far. We'll come back, and we have one more for this first panel. Ms. Pat Brantley, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on the recently released draft Aspire Technical Guide. I'm Pat Brantley, and my testimony centers on Aspire, but also references associated Aspire needs, such as simulated Aspire outcomes and calculators. In my opinion, Aspire represents a broad and compelling vision for a progressive school accountability system that, in the words used to frame the initial rollout of this effort, would center equity and also raise the bar for performance. Both of these are worthy goals. Difficult to achieve, without a doubt. Contentious to define, absolutely. Impossible to reach consensus on? Probably. Still, when I consider the promise of Aspire, improving equity and raising the bar, I'm excited for our students and for our schools. After all, even with progress being made to recover from the pandemic, no one is satisfied with where we are. Aspire, then, in my opinion, has an opportunity to move school outcomes further and faster than ever before for all students from all kinds of backgrounds. I'd like to give you an example. In November, the PCSB staff released the first Aspire calculator. For the first time, I felt like I could see both the forest and the trees. Not only did I have a summative score for each Friendship campus, I knew where we were serving students well and where we needed to grow. We noted immediately that the way we scheduled some students for services reduced their opportunity for advanced studies. By this semester, we've made changes, giving more students the opportunity to show they can perform at the college level. That, to me, is a promise of Aspire. Greater equity, yes. A higher bar, without a doubt. But also an opportunity to get it right for more students and actually improve outcomes. Your staff has worked over the year tirelessly, hearing from LEA leaders and others. It hasn't always been easy. But what we have seen as recently as this past Friday is a consideration for the ideas and concerns raised by LEAs. Today, Aspire feels like the right direction and a better tool for centering equity and for raising the bar. But should you choose to make it a tool by which LEAs can improve outcomes for young people, I urge you to please prioritize providing LEAs with modeling, simulations that incorporate the most recent changes and calculators so that we can begin planning that's necessary to meet a higher bar. To this end, I ask the following. Accelerate the rollout of final floors, targets, calculators, and related rules so schools possess the roadmap to achieve success. Maintain the floors and targets for 3 years from the time at which they are finalized, not from some time in the past. Consistency and stability matter. Accelerate the rollout of school-selected metrics. Our schools are unique. As families consider school quality, they should have a full picture of each school. Transparently publish R-squared analysis or correlations to at-risk and poverty by each framework. Finally, consider the unique capacities of multi-school LEAs. A multi-school LEA where the vast majority of schools are level 1 or 2, and where no school is below level 3 is doing good work and should be considered to be in good standing by the DC PCSB. To the board, I am not here to tell you to slow down. I'm here to beg you to please go as fast as you can to not only center on equity and raise the bar, but to give schools the modeling, the floors, the targets, the simulated scores, the school-selected metrics that reflect our unique schools, because that's what we need and can use to truly leverage Aspire to improve the outcomes of the young people we serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brantley. Thank you for the full suite of panelists here. We've gotten We've already gotten a chance to dip into some questions, but I anticipate we will have some more. And as I mentioned earlier, we will have staff that are working on the framework join us later during the board meeting so that we can tackle some of the questions that have been raised tonight with them. So with that in mind, other board members, do you have some clarifying or probing questions at this point?
I have a question for Ms. Brantley. What is your position on the extension of the pilot year?
I think that other people have raised really important points regarding the pilot year. In the original timeline, the intention was to release the draft technical guide around May of 23. That means that the school year that for most of us started on or about August 15th of 23 going into 24, we would have seen how performance was happening and floors and targets would go, and we could have made changes. That 23-24 data wouldn't have been published. As we sit today, it is March 18, and I'll use the high school as an example. The high school framework has something like 21 individual metrics. Between January and just this past Friday, about a third of those have substantial changes in them. And so while we're working really hard at Friendship, but I'm certain other schools, to understand the impact of those changes, we don't have a lot of information or time to right the ship, if you will, for the school year that's coming up.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, just a brief reflection on just a thanks to all of you who signed up to speak. I feel like the themes are very clear, right, for us to discuss in the hearing. The question of the pilot year, the question about school selected metrics, the question about what we accelerate and what we slow down. Ms. Brantley, I'm particularly, I appreciate the urge to go fast. I'm reminded of that quote when we think about optimal learning, about going as fast as we can, but as slow as we must. And I think in a lot of ways, when we're trying to get something like this right, that's a good mantra to live by. So thank you all for your comments. And I think we'll be carrying reflections from them into the public hearing.
So, hi, I'm back. Elise, I actually wanted to follow up with you as a board member. I actually appreciate your perspective around governance. As we think about this, one, I appreciate, and Washington Latin should be glad that there is a board that is looking deeply at academic oversight and focusing in that way. And I hope other LEA boards will hear that and learn from you all if they need to. Can you share with us what you think your board will need for you to fully understand Aspire and to be able to do your due diligence as a governor, if you will, of Washington Latin?
I hate to say this, but time is part of it. We have really invested and we've had numerous sessions, but this is not our day job. We come together once a month, and this is complex and outside, the realm of our everyday expertise. And so as I've mentioned, I've really invested a lot of personal time, and I'm a former teacher in trying, so I already have some of the vocabulary in trying to understand what's different from the prior framework from the PMF, how the floors and targets, how the new growth measurement works. That, there are just some technical things that I think we as board members, and specifically academic committee chairs and academic committee members, really need time to kind of wrap our heads around. And the most important thing I would say is we tried, and I'm going to get the terminology wrong here, so I apologize, but we did have one session where we were able to work with like a model or a calculator, but even just that took a lot of time to ask questions on and understand how it worked. And I understand even that was sort of incomplete. So to the prior speaker's point, I would say getting that data, doing all those things to make that possible would be really helpful. But then also, it just given, it did seem when we met with Dr. Walker Davis last summer that the hope was that this would move much more quickly and this would all be ready and the kinks would be ironed out. But she was very candid with us. what a challenge it is and how much has had to go into it. And we've been so grateful for the revisions that the board has been open to. So I think we're just like we aren't quite ready with our community for prime time on this. And the only other thing I'd add is that one of the prior speakers, just you asked about the sort of, okay, if we have the pilot year this year, then does that mean we go full bore? Is it, or is there another hold harmless year next year? And I guess I think a full pilot year is really important, but I would, if the board is not open to that, I would encourage at least thinking about things like whether the designations are necessary in the first year if you decide to go forward, because to the point of the model, many schools are going to drop. They're sort of the public designation is going to change, and people are going to need to wrap their heads around that. So I just wonder whether it has to be full consequences and designation following the pilot year whenever you decide it ends, or if there's some flexibility there. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. I would just like to say that I appreciate the panel and the perspectives that were brought on here. I think, as you all know, I'm always going to come to this as a former school leader and understand what it was like. I remember when PMF was rolled out. I would say, and I don't think this is for you, but one of the things that I like the staff to do is really talk about the difference between a pilot versus a hold harmless versus, a full rollout. Because I do think I definitely understand all of the points that you've made. I also know that we have been a long time without an accountability framework in a way to truly measure the performance of schools. And I think you all know I'm also equally a strong believer that all the autonomy that LEAs receive it is in exchange for accountability. And at the end of the day, we've got children and students who are, who we need to know what's going on and how they're doing and move accordingly. So I think it's a good conversation, and I appreciate the perspectives, particularly the directness around the way that it has rolled out, Pat, as you shared, the way it's rolled out, the changing metrics. And I don't think that is as a result of the staff just delaying. I think it is trying to get it right and being in response to lots of feedback in ways that we know the sector was not engaged the last time an accountability framework rolled out. So I just want to make sure that is also for the record. And as you, Ms. Graham, continue to talk with your board to understand where some of that delay has come from, it has actually been in direct response to feedback and trying to ensure our framework actually does take into consideration sector perspective. And I think I would hope as school leaders, we recognize that big win too. So as we know, we have work to continue to do. So I'm going to stop talking because I don't think this was the purpose of the pilot or bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantel. Thank you, panel one. This is illuminating and helpful for all of us, and really appreciate you all preparing this and coming before us this evening. Panel number 2, I welcome Kelly Okun, Scott Goldstein, Armand Cuevas, and Caitlin Earl. And I think it'll actually be one at a time, but that's the group that'll be coming before us, beginning with Kelly Okun.
Beginning with me? Good
Yes,
afternoon.
welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Dear board leaders, thank you so much for having us. My name is Kelly Okun, and I teach in Ward 5 at Monteverde PCS. I've been teaching in charter schools for about 16 years in both Ohio and DC. I'm here to talk about teacher wellness and its close ties to teacher retention. Retaining teachers has become increasingly difficult, as we all know. DC is not exempt. Charter schools in particular in DC have had a much higher turnover rate in recent years, with the 38% turnover rate 2 years ago and 31% this past year. This is significantly higher than DCPS, which is about 24% 2 years ago and only 20% this past year. Now, we know that part of DC's success is their more competitive pay, but the flexibility that charter schools can offer could have been a mitigating factor because their districts are generally smaller, but they're able to implement creative and innovative changes at a much higher rate than larger districts. Unfortunately, the problems that we see with the new Aspire system include that charter school retention data, teacher retention data is still a mystery for both school staff and the community because that information is not generally shared with the public, although DCPS does report it. And the Aspire system could create another missed opportunity to share this meaningful data and its impact with because the public, and its impact with the public because teacher retention data is not just part of, because the data is not a part of your new reporting framework, excuse me. We know that student learning outcomes are directly tied to teacher retention. In my school, there have been times when we looked around and there was only one person left on an entire grade level team. This devastated the students, their families, and caused a lot of stress and anxiety to the remaining teacher. At Mundo Verde in particular, the problem with mid-year transitions and the lack of retention was so egregious that it even made the news. Teacher wellness is also student wellness, so retaining staff builds trust within our communities and allows both students and families the security they need to know what they can expect year after year. Finally, we know that there are some charter schools that are getting it right when it comes to teacher retention, and we need to look to them to find out how they are retaining their staff and benefit from their model. Publishing teacher retention data as part of the new Aspire system is another way to bring the public school communities together. I grew up knowing that I would have my older brothers and sisters teachers. Some of it was out of fear, some of it I really welcome. We need your commitment to prioritize non-test measures so that schools can provide what really matters, a well-rounded education that focuses on school stability and caring relationships with teachers who are building legacies within their schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hukun. We're welcoming up our next speaker, but please don't go far. Mr. Goldstein, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Scott Goldstein. I'm the founder and executive director of Empower Ed. I'm also a former DC public charter school teacher and board member, so I understand the dynamics and pressures of accountability system on the ground in our charter schools. I'm here to discuss the new Aspire accountability framework. We applaud the shift to a focus on academic growth, a measure schools have significantly more control over, rather than relying predominantly on measuring proficiency alone. We appreciate the intention to include a school-specific measure since each of our public charter schools in the district have a unique mission and goals. I'm here to also implore you to add educator retention as an accountability metric. There are two reasons we implore you to add retention as part of the Aspire framework. First, the research is abundant and clear that educator retention is one of the single most important factors in improving student outcomes. It is not a correlation, it's direct causation. Stability, relationships, and adult culture are the sine qua non of school improvement, according to researcher John Safier. Without it, nothing else works. I understand you want to be laser focused on outcomes, but that's exactly why accountability systems must hold schools accountable for the few inputs that we know for sure, without doubt, contribute to those outcomes. Any accountability system that seeks to help schools improve student outcomes but fails to measure the factors we know result in it will not be part of the solution. From school year 21-22 to 22-23, charter schools had nearly double the turnover of DCPS. The gap is closed, but not substantially enough. This is not a call to indict them for that, but rather to prioritize support, because we know what gets measured is what gets prioritized. Empower Ed has worked with over 20 DC schools, a large share of them charter schools, to support educator wellness and retention, and we so appreciate the work we do with these schools and their dedication to providing a stable school environment for students and families, and recognizing the essential truth that educator wellness supports student wellness and student wellness supports educator wellness. I know not every factor contributing to retention is within the control of the school. Some charter schools struggle to compete with DCPS salaries, which is why we advocated last year to help them get there. In our experience working with schools, most leaders want to focus on educator well-being, but it's truthfully hard to keep on top of it on the to-do list with so many competing priorities. That's why having a partner to project manage and support educators implementing a wellness plan works. Including this measure in Aspire will be one more way to support schools in bringing the resources they need to bear to support the people who do the work every day to improve outcomes for students. You have the power to ensure this system promotes a human-centered approach to school improvement, and we hope you will. Thank you.
Did anyone hear any of that? I don't think my mic was on. My apologies. Scott, please don't go far. Welcome, Mr. Cuevas. And please go ahead. We'll save our questions for the end of this panel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Armand Cuevas. I'm currently a resident of Ward 1. I'm also a charter school teacher in Ward 4. I've been teaching for 11 years, 5 in a Ward 1 DCPS high school, Ward 5 DCPS high school. And that last year, so that was 21 to 22, that was the hardest school year of my life. And for my own mental health, I needed to take a break from teaching. The schedule was just unrelenting, and I didn't feel like the school, the administrators are really prioritized like retaining teachers. So I'm here to advocate that schools use the metric of teacher retention, specifically in the Aspire framework, because retention is just so important to me as a teacher, especially now that the school I work at here in Ward 4 has just much stronger retention and I can see it. It's important and we should be measuring it. I really think about my students where retention is important. When I started working in that DCPS high school in 2017 for 5 years, I saw so many 9th grade teachers come and go, and the students we taught would move on to upper grades, 10th, 11th, 12th. They would come visit me in 9th grade, but they would lament the fact that all their other 9th grade teachers had left. At one point, a student said, "I guess we drove them away." And that's a horrible thing for our students to think. Meanwhile, the school I work at now has pretty good retention. And even though it's my first year there, there's a culture of graduates coming back to visit old teachers or get support or even work at the school. Teacher retention is also important for staff culture. Teachers feel that when they see the same staff that they've started with, there's like a greater sense of belonging and comfort. They're more likely to take on new initiatives like clubs, sports, research on school policies, and other things that contribute to a stronger school culture and just happiness at work. Finally, many studies also show that student success is greatly affected by teacher retention. So we need to be measuring it. Kind of like what Scott said earlier, when the PCSB measures it, it serves as an incentive for each school to prioritize whatever strategy works for them to retain teachers and staff. We already know schools work very hard for standardized tests, PARCC, or now it's DCK, purely because of those incentives, those measurements. So people work hard to do well on those tests, even though so many people don't actually believe in it or don't think it's good for students, but they do it anyway because it's required and it's measured. If this happens for something that people don't really believe in, imagine what staff retention could look like if it's measured and many people actually really care about it. So please include teacher retention in your metrics for Aspire. There seems to be a lot of positive changes in there, such as the increased focus on growth. So let's add retention to that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Cuevas. Please don't go far. We have one more speaker from this panel, Caitlin Earl. Welcome. You're on mute.
Hi. Okay, hi, good evening. My name is Caitlin Earl. I've worked at the same charter school in Ward 4 for 7 years. And I'm also here to talk about teacher retention and why I think you should include teacher retention as a measurement in the Aspire framework. I really do appreciate that you are shifting the focus more towards growth as a measurement of student outcomes, but I think that your framework is incomplete without a picture of teacher outcomes as well. It's abundantly clear that we are in a moment of crisis in K through 12 education. We have far less college graduates choosing to enter the teaching profession than ever before. If you talk to any HR department at a school, you will hear from them how hard it is to find teachers right now. If we care about student outcomes, it's essential more now than ever that we hold on to and invest in the teachers we already have. A 2020 study of DCPS teacher attrition found that a teacher's effectiveness increases at a greater rate when they teach in a supportive and collegial working environment, and that teacher replacement costs, including expenses related to separation, recruitment, hiring, and training, can be more than $20,000 in urban districts. That's $20,000 that would be much better spent on measures to retain teachers. Not only is teaching a skill that takes years to master, it also takes time to acclimate to a school's norms and culture, learn the student population's needs, and build productive collaborative relationships with colleagues and the community. None of this happens in 1 or even 2 years. Looking at teacher retention tells you whether the adults in a school feel valued and effective or burnt out, disinvested, and replaceable. It tells you whether students come to class every day expecting to be taught by a dedicated, effective teacher, or to find that their teacher has quit and who knows when the next one will appear. These are the stories behind test scores. And if you want to push schools to serve their students well, you have to push them to serve their teachers too. We should care as much about creating schools where teachers and students feel valued and invested in as we do about creating schools that churn out test scores by any means necessary. A common saying in education when talking about classroom management is that what you focus on grows. Please make sure that you are focusing on the right things. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Earl, and I'll welcome back the rest of the panel. So Mr. Goldstein, others. Rivas, Ms. McClune. Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time to prepare this testimony and come deliver it before us. And it sounds like we have a couple current classroom educators here. Is that right? Ms. McClune and Mr. Cuevas, you've returned to the classroom. Is that right? And Ms. Earl, you are still at the same school you've been at for a while. Is that right?
I'm an instructional coach now, but I was teaching for 6 years before that. Same school.
Thank you for coming before us. I'd like to, just like we did last time, I'd like to welcome the rest of the board members to ask some follow-up questions. I may have one or two myself.
Hi, I as well want to thank the educators in particular for speaking to us tonight. I found what you said to be illuminating and informative as the rookie board member here tonight. So thank you. I would love to hear and would love to give you all the opportunity to speak about why you think turnover is at the rate that it is currently. I would just like to give you the floor to speak about that. I'm interested and I'd like you to talk about it.
I'll bring up one thing because I think it's a hugely complex topic. So hopefully the other three panelists can add on a lot more. But I switched from middle school math to teaching 12th grade, which is not a tested grade. And I can tell you that the stress levels, I wasn't even aware of how stressful testing was and how much focus and energy I put into preparing for testing until I moved to a grade where that wasn't a metric that I was being measured on or that my school was being measured on. The freedom to just like do a really good job at what I was teaching without worrying about whether I was on pace to teach an entire year's worth of curriculum by April. It's just like, it was a much better year. I was able to really dig into my passion in a way that I never could before. So testing.
I'd like to speak about the fact that when we are looking at what happened in our society post-COVID, a lot of places became a lot more flexible when it came to time, and a lot of innovation came out of it as well. But it didn't at all. Like we're still, held to the same rigor, the same standards. But one thing that we know is that punching an 8 to 5 is not going to work. And not only are we burnt out, but so are the students, and they need more opportunities within the classroom. And so do we. We need to have a more flexibility in our scheduling so that we can get the work done within the school day. Like we are getting burnt out with the hours upon hours of work that we have to take home because there's not a lot of planning, not a lot of collaboration. We can't do a lot of depth like we need to within the school day. So we need more opportunities for students to engage in more worldly project-based learning opportunities while we can do the work that we need to do within the school day.
Just add on to that very briefly that this is something obviously we survey all teachers about routinely. What are the major reasons? And so we can segment that. We had a 1,100 person survey last year. If we take out the charter school responses, which are about half of that, the number one response was flexible scheduling options. The number two response was less focus and time spent on testing. And so we can go through some of the rest of them, but that is the flexibility that Kelly highlighted, especially as it's become predominant in other professions, is a big reason.
And then another thing that I've heard from a lot of people, and to me to some extent, is like the adults in the building. I think there's a lot of people who are doing a really good job, whether as teachers or as administrators. And I think there's a lot of people that also administrators are just very out of touch, and people feel like they want to leave because they feel like certain admin are out to get them, or certain admin don't have the students' interest in mind. And sometimes it's not even admin like at the school level, but it goes further into like DCPS central office, or like the local LEA of that charter school. So I think there's that aspect as well.
Thank you. I am always intrigued to hear from our educators, so thank you for that.
Thank you for having us.
I was just going to say thank you all to the educators. Thank you very much for your service. I have a question which just going back to something you said, Mr. Goldstein, but any of you can respond to it. You talked about the research supporting. As I understand it, the other sort of thing that research supports is thinking about matching the demographics of our teachers with those of our students. And so one wondering I have, assuming, our lawyers would allow us to do it, and I defer to them on whether that's actually allowed, but would you be supportive of a sub-metric that is around retention of educators of color?
Yes, yes, yes. And thank you so much for that question. That is incredibly important. And actually, as ASSE was putting together their framework, we asked them to do exactly that. They did include that data in the school report card, teacher demographics, though not exactly how we recommended. And you have an opportunity to get it even better on equity. And what that would look like is a representation gap metric, essentially measuring what is the gap between the student population and the educator population at a particular school. How close are they coming? Because that makes a huge difference in student outcomes to have at least one educator who looks like you teaching you.
Yeah, great. I see what you're doing there. You have the opportunity to get it right. Unlike those folks at ASSE. I appreciate that.
They got it partially right. Yeah.
Yeah. Understood. Thank you very much.
I'm also appreciating, I have a kindergartner who does this all the time at the dinner table. And it's nice to see it in this setting as well. Thank you all. Do other board members, do we have additional follow-up questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So yes, I want to also just co-sign thanking you all as educators for staying in the work. So definitely understanding the power of teacher retention, also understanding that sometimes attrition is good attrition. And I'm not going to go into that, but I just want to make sure we name that. Is there, when you talk about something as high stakes as an accountability framework like Aspire, is there a tool that, and this is literally a question I actually don't know the answer to, is there a tool that measures teacher retention in a standardized way, meaning that it says X percentage of retention is effective or good and this is bad? Like, how would you suggest we measure that? So a school that has 70%, is that good? Is it 80? Is there a tool? That's my first question. A standardized tool.
I'm happy to answer if others want to jump into it. So yes, there is a so two things. One, ASSE reports the data in a standardized way with the definition of educator, so we know what the retention data is right now, which is a good advancement. But to your question about what is the right retention, so the right retention is not 100%. You're right, right? There are going to be some people who are not right for that environment, or some people who are not right for that school. But this is what we do in working with schools on educator wellness and retention. So we've studied pretty extensively what the right amount is. And I wouldn't say it's exactly the same. You want to set a bar for every school. But we do have a pretty good idea of what the right range is. And that is that there's a business philosophy that I think should actually apply to education pretty broadly here as well, which is 10% turnover in any organization could be justifiable. People move on, people weren't a good fit, right? 15% is kind of thought of as the upper end of that. And there's a pretty broad kind of philosophy that anything above 15% turnover is usually organizational dysfunction. And there's something wrong with the culture. And so that's the measure we use. It's used across industries, not just in education, but I think this is one area where actually there's a business philosophy that does make sense here, which is if there's any culture where there's 15, 20, 25% turnover, there's probably something wrong with the culture and not just with the talent, because we should be helping them grow. And so I think that's a good thing to think about.
So to answer my question, there's not a standardized teacher education retention tool. I understand what you're saying about philosophy and business. I'm talking specifically in education. It's just there isn't a standard tool aside from what you're saying, ASSE's education.
I'm not sure what you mean tool, like a citywide way to judge whether they have a good retention rate or a bad retention rate.
Right. So this accountability framework is looking at all schools, right, and creating the same measures and metrics that we're basing all schools against. And we're using formal, standardized tools and references. And so I'm asking for what you're proposing. What would you suggest the charter board use to measure it? And measure whether or not, so not just measure it in terms of the number, but its effectiveness and its score and things like that. And what I'm hearing is that there isn't right now a formal tool.
The Learning Policy Institute, which is a national organization, has such tools. So there are national examples of tools like that. DC does not have one currently that says this is good retention, this is bad retention. But what I would say is what I suggested is a good rate. But just like you're measuring growth now with test scores, you can measure growth with retention rates, and therefore it is equitable automatically because you're looking at school improvement rather than a single bar for all schools.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, panel two. As I mentioned earlier, we have members of our staff who are working on the framework will be joining the board meeting later this evening, and we'll be able to surface some of these questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Sophie Chesterton. We are now going to move on to some general public comment. So we will go individual by individual for this. And for this, I'd like to welcome Anne Sophie Jesperson.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Perfect.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. This comment is in regards to the relocation of Mary McLeod Bethune Charter School. I just wanted to speak in support of that relocation. I think since the last time that topic was brought up with the charter school board, the school has done a lot in terms of reaching out to the community and having events and trying to address any questions that folks have. I also think as a parent who has students who go to that school currently and have been there the oldest has been there, 3 years. We have seen the teachers there and administrators do all they can in the current space that they're in, but having more space, more outside space for kids to run around in, more indoor space for them to use would be great. And also getting all of the kids kind of out of the basement level of the current church would also be helpful in terms of improving the access to Wi-Fi and things like that, which is pretty critical, right, for schools. And so I think just having the school have that opportunity to have more space to educate the kids would be great.
Thank you, Ms. Jesperson. Thank you for making the time to join us this evening. And I know this public comment period is a difficult one to know exactly when you can jump on. So thank you for being patient with us.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'd next like to welcome Rosalind Lake. Okay, we'll stay tuned in case Rosalind joins us later. Lauren Gray. All right, she's coming on.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Hi, I'm a DC charter parent, and I wanted to speak to attest to the remarkable educators, Ms. Kerstetter and Mr. Bussey, that are founding the Blue Wildflower Charter School. I've had 2 children matriculate through their early education classrooms at DC Prep Edgewood. My children receive a top-notch education that set the foundation for their continued academic success. These educators always went the extra mile, whether that being giving detailed updates on my student status or participating in parent action committees. Their consideration and competency are evident in how they interact with students, parents, and the broader community. It would truly be a blessing to the residents of Ward 8 to experience these phenomenal educators. Not only will the enrolled preschool students under their Direct Care Blue Charter benefit from their education the school's founding year, their dedication to community advocacy and responsibility will have a lasting imprint on Ward 8. Please allow this charter school to move forward so that more children can bloom under their attention and leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Thank you for taking the time to prepare your testimony and for being patient with us this evening to deliver it.
Thank you.
Your kids had this great experience with these teachers.
Thank you.
All right. Board members, any follow-up questions? Okay. And Aisha, do we have any? Okay. The other two speakers were not in the queue. They may have had to move on to other things, but the board has access to their submitted testimony, and we will make sure that we review that. So this concludes the public comment portion of our agenda this evening. Next, the board will receive a presentation about the Aspire Policy and Technical Guide. And for that, I will yield the floor to Dr. Walker Davis and staff, Melody Sampson, Chief of School Performance, and Kirsten Floyd, the Director of Data and Accountability, to facilitate this presentation.
Thank you, Chair Cruzy. As this board knows, about 3 years ago, early in my tenure as Executive Director of DC PCSB, we released our first ever strategic roadmap. We saw the roadmap as our North Star guiding our direction. Our strategic roadmap has 3 priorities: excellent schools, enduring partnerships, and effective organization. One of the goals in the excellent schools priority includes revising the accountability system that supports DC PCSB's overarching vision that every DC student receives a quality education that makes them feel valued and prepares them for lifelong learning, fulfilling careers, and economic security. We fundamentally believe that schools should produce equitable outcomes for all students, ensuring that students from historically marginalized groups receive a quality education. To support schools in creating or sustaining environments where all students thrive, DC PCSB provides oversight in 3 specific areas: academics, finances, and organization. Today, this board will spend time focusing on one of our academic deliverables, our accountability system, which we propose to call Aspire. Our accountability system enables us to monitor, evaluate, and report school performance in various academic areas. So, why did we revise our accountability system? Using information collected from internal and external research as the foundation for revising our accountability system, we sought to develop a tool that would increase the visibility of students furthest from opportunity. The system, which we now propose to call Aspire, reports disaggregated information, including race and ethnicity, expands school performance levels by moving from 3 tiers to 5 levels, raises performance expectations, and places a greater emphasis on growth. We propose to call our revised accountability system Aspire. Aspire stands for the Annual School Performance Index Report and Evaluation. Simply put, Aspire means achieving excellent schools for all students, particularly those from communities that have been historically marginalized. DC PCSB staff has been working on revising our accountability system for more than 2 years. The Aspire Policy and Technical Guide opened for public comment last month, and tonight we have had our first of 2 public hearings. The second hearing will be on April 8th. So, what's different about Aspire? Aspire will have 5 levels, no more tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. We will have level 1, indicating exemplary performance. Level 2, strong performance. Level 3, satisfactory performance, which is still good. Level 4 indicates weak performance, and level 5 is unsatisfactory performance. Aspire has 5 frameworks in the system, and nearly every school will be evaluated on 4 categories of performance. Similar to the PMF, or our performance management framework, the Aspire system, as I mentioned, is made up of 5 frameworks based on students served and programs offered at the school. Aspire will have similar performance categories as the PMF, but Aspire emphasizes school performance rather than student performance. Let's go into detail about what each framework category will measure. School progress will measure how well schools are assisting in students' academic growth, especially, again, those from historically marginalized groups. School achievement measures how well schools prepare students for academic success. School environment measures how well schools' environments encourage learning and how consistent schools are at engaging with their students. And as you've heard mentioned tonight, we will be including school-specific performance, which will uniquely measure qualities specific to a school's mission. Two measures will be selected by each school in this category. It is important to reiterate that you, as DC PCSB's board, will use Aspire to make oversight decisions. We also hope that schools will use it to understand and improve impact on student learning, and that parents will use it to know how schools serve students. We appreciated hearing from the public tonight and look forward to hearing more on April 8th and throughout this open public comment period. As a reminder, I did want to share our engagement opportunities that are remaining. They're on the board here. We are actively working toward a vote of the Aspire Technical Guide and our Charter Goals policy on June 10th. But before we are available to answer your questions, I would like to turn it over to Melody, our Chief School Performance Officer, and Kirsten, our Director of Data and Accountability, to share the revisions that we've made since holding office hours last month.
Thank you, Dr. Walker-Davis. Good evening, everyone. My name is Melody Sampson, and I am DC PCSB's Chief School Performance Officer.
Good evening. I am Kirsten Floyd, the Data and Accountability Director. Tonight, we are holding a public hearing on the proposed Aspire Policy and Technical Guide.
So we heard from a panel of school leaders this evening. We also received a letter from the DC Charter School Alliance that was endorsed by 58 LEA leaders, and it outlines some feedback for us about the Aspire system that is similar to what you heard from school leaders tonight. We are definitely considering their recommendations, and we are particularly tossing around or grappling with this notion of adjusting the implementation timeline. This is going to be probably one of the more challenging questions that we need to resolve, because we need to balance school leaders' interest as far as the time that they need to plan to adjust to the Aspire system. But then we also have a responsibility as authorizers to communicate with the public about how schools are doing. In November 2019 was the last time that we reported publicly on school performance. So we really have a hard decision to make on that front. But I will pass it over to Kirsten, who can elaborate on conversations that we most recently had with high school leaders.
On Friday, this past Friday, March 15th, we met with 27 high school leaders. During the meeting, we presented refined measures and business rules designed to increase students' exposure to advanced coursework and college readiness assessments, while increasing opportunities to measure progress among high school students. This was another request in the DC Charter Alliance letter. We plan to continue to engage with high school leaders in the coming weeks on adjustments to their framework.
Chair Cruz, oh, sorry, you've heard a lot tonight from public comment, and I'm sure board members have questions, so we are available to jump right into those questions.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Melody and Kirsten, for this presentation, Dr. Walker-Davis, for the review and kind of recap of where we are. And board members, we've had the opportunity to hear from a number of witnesses this evening. I would love to kick it off with the first question and then invite others to join in. You just mentioned that you met yesterday with high school leaders. And as I'm reflecting on that first panel, I think that the LEAs who came up to speak represented a mixture of schools. Is it our understanding that the requests are particularly related to high school or for across all of the frameworks? Because there's 5 frameworks here, but I'm hearing a particular emphasis on high school.
So we've definitely, the bulk of the letter that we received from the Alliance and even the comments that we heard tonight do speak generally about our efforts to revise our accountability system. We are, however, zeroed in on some adjustments to the high school framework. What we heard from school leaders probably back in January when they got a preview of the technical guide was that they are interested in seeing us expand on opportunities to demonstrate growth among high schoolers. And that has just been a challenge for us because across the country, folks are not typically measuring growth among high school students.
Thank you. I'm sure I will have more, but would like to open it up to other board members. Please, Jim.
I heard the panelists tonight express 3 concerns about Aspire. First, they asked for an extension of the pilot year. Second, they asked that the mission-specific goals be approved before Aspire is fully implemented. And third, there was a request to track and publish retention data. Are you in a position tonight, I don't want to put you on the spot unfairly, but are you in a position tonight to respond to any of those? And if not, what can you say about your schedule and process for responding to what we heard tonight?
Vice Chair Salmon, I'll take a first stab at it and may ask Melody and Kirsten to help out. First, I wanted to speak to the teacher retention. It is true that that is not part of our accountability framework, neither the PMF nor what we are proposing in the Aspire framework. But I do want to name that we do have teacher retention as an element of all of the annual reports that LEAs do submit to us each year. And so that information would be contained in the annual reports for each of our LEAs. I think the question, though, is a valid one worth considering for some future iteration of our accountability system. We wanted to build on the measures that have been tested over time. We wanted to make sure that there was increased visibility on student performance, which is why you see our disaggregation by student group. And as we'll talk a little bit more later, we were very excited by the possibility of including the school-specific measures. And so at this time, we're not prepared to add teacher retention, but it is not something that is off of our minds for future consideration. I would say, though, that part of our challenge in designing an accountability framework that can be consistent across all of our schools, and particularly key in on schools' performance in helping students meet their academic outcomes. There's always this balance between outcome measures versus input measures. And I don't want to dispute the data about the relevance of teacher retention. I think it is one of those things that we need to determine what appropriate balance there is on outcomes versus inputs in an accountability system is really looking at schools' performance in meeting academic achievement for their students. So that's what I will say about teacher retention. Melody or Kirsten, would you like to speak to the other 2 points that Chair Cruzy made?
I can get us started, and I think I will just take an opportunity to sort of do a level set to make sure that we're all clear what school leaders are asking for when they ask for an extended implementation. So right now, what we've proposed is that the 24-25 school year would be the first year that we would report on publicly outcomes under the Aspire system. That means not actually releasing the public data until the 25-26 school year. So assuming that the board approves this system in June, that means that the 23-24 school year will will be another opportunity for us to apply the Aspire model to the 23-24 data and allow schools to see how they would perform if we were to actually publish Aspire outcomes for the current school year. So that means that schools would be operating with school year 22-23 and 23-24 Aspire simulated outcomes. Of course, by the time they would get the 23-24 simulated data, they would already be underway with the 24-25 school year. So that's sort of the rub that school leaders are confronting. As far as this notion of hold harmless or holding harmless but publishing outcomes, that's another issue. So under the charter goals policy, which we had, we'll have a public hearing on it at the next board meeting on April 8th. Under the proposed revision to the charter goals policy, we do not speak about, we don't want to publish outcomes for 24-25. Excuse me, we don't want to publish outcomes for 23-24, but we could use it as an opportunity to demonstrate improvement between 23-24 and 24-25. Sorry, lots of numbers there. But the point is that we are committed to not publishing outcomes for 23-24 and instead just using the charter goals policy as a means of demonstrating improvement between the soft 23-24 year and the actual implementation year of 24-25.
So Melody, I'm confused. So I really want us to stay here for 1 minute because I think, so I get it for where we are now, which is the 23-24 school year. 24-25, I'm a school leader. Come June, I'm gonna have, hopefully, if we move according, I feel like I keep going, trying to make sure I don't look crazy on the thing too. But so if I'm a school leader going into 24-25 school year, which is next school year, I'm going to know the measures upon which I will be evaluated.
Correct.
Right? Let's assume that. And then will that be used? I guess my question is, will that be used to evaluate a school in any way publicly, or when it comes to a renewal amendment, will the data be used in any way?
Yes. So the data would be public, published on our website and in whatever sort of school quality report that we decide to release the following school year in 25-26. When schools are up for review or renewal, and when the 24-25 school year is a part of their review period, then we can use performance on the Aspire system to determine continuance or renewal. However, that would be one of multiple pathways for the 24-25 school year.
Okay, so then what is our response to school leaders when they say, I guess now, if I'm thinking from a school leader perspective, that the system is not finished, right? And we are still working on it. When I learn it, where is the kind of what historically has been a hold harmless year, where we rolled it out, but it was not used, the data was not used, it was not published public. I don't think it was. I don't, maybe it was, but I know it was not used, right? Thus the hold harmless. Where are we giving schools that ability to have that same kind of impact? Or are we not?
I think that the environment is just different. So when we released the PMF, we did have a very small cohort of LEAs that were a part of the pilot year, and then we rolled it out full-fledged to the eligible LEAs the following year. The only time that there was like a legitimate hold harmless period was when OSSI transitioned the state assessment from DC CAS to PARC. That was the year that we really did a full hold harmless and didn't assess the state performance on, performance on the state assessment.
Okay, I don't know that I thought the first year.
That was 14-15 going, that was the 14-15 school year.
Okay, so what is our response to the LEAs that say that in terms of the question around capacity, changing measures, and so forth around even our own work internally. What's our response to that?
Yeah, I think there are multiple answers there. So for starters, on the communications front, we understand that we've got sort of a long road ahead of us to help folks get acclimated to this transition. But I also want to emphasize that it is a transition. We are building off of a performance management framework that has very similar measures. The difference here is that we are looking at student group performance when it comes to pre-K through 12. That is novel for our accountability system. And there's, of course, the difference of that transition from from tiers to levels. That really just gives us more nuanced information about how schools are performing. But on the whole, I think that there's a lot of similarity between the PMF and Aspire. And on top of that, there's a lot of similarity between Aspire and the DC state report card that OSSE produces. And I think that that creates sort of a bridge for our school leaders to get adjusted faster.
Okay, and I would agree with that, but OSSE state report card won't close or hinder a school in the same way that the Aspire framework will.
That's
right. So I do want us to just name that. Okay,
That's
I'm gonna go ahead. No.
I just want to name that that's also why we have built in some pathways in our charter goals policy so that we give schools multiple opportunities to demonstrate goal attainment. Our interest is not in shuttering schools instantly through the Aspire system.
Okay, but once the Aspire is in effect, it will supersede the charter's goals policy?
No, the charter goals policy is that now supersedes the PMF's goals policy and creates a means for using Aspire as your charter goals. It also sets some criteria, some parameters around negotiating individual goals if you opt not to use Aspire.
And Treasurer Wright, I wanted to name sort of the practical implication of adjustment in the timeline, and also to name that when we, as Melody mentioned, the notion of having multiple pathways was very important to us. That is an element of the current charter goals policy. It will still be an element of the revision that we're proposing, and the practical implication of is it a pilot? Is it a whole harmless? We are not planning to do public reporting like we would have done the quality reports where we name a level, et cetera, for a school, but we do need a way to determine whether or not that school has met its goals if they're under review. And so we are looking at level 3 performance being any school that meets level 3 or above would be eligible, would have been deemed to have met their goals. Even a school that might be identified as level 4, if they can demonstrate improvement from the year prior, which is where the 23 school year 23-24 outcomes come into play, that school would also be deemed as having met its goals. It is really the schools that would be at level 5 that would be the area that we are looking at sort of additional action on our part. And that does not necessarily mean an automatic charter revocation. It does mean an additional review. So the practical implication of that is that we would have to identify another way other than our Aspire framework to have a school meet its goals. We are still committed, even if we were to use any of those pathways, to not publish their level or their score. We would have to indicate in the review that they met this pathway, having deemed one of those things to be true, but we would not be putting out what was formerly the school quality report. And so that is how we balanced, as Melody opened, the responsibility to have some way of measuring accountability coming out of years of not doing so, but honoring that schools need time to also understand. And so the majority of schools who are not up for review will not have that public reporting or that deliberation around their progress. It would be the schools that are up for review that we would have to have a goals determination mechanism.
Okay, one final clarification, then I see other board members come. I see you, Nick, come off mute. So in terms of just understanding our process today, was this school year meant to be a true kind of pilot year of Aspire? And if so, how can that be if the floors and targets, or do schools have all the floors and targets for each of the measures? I guess I'm trying to figure out how we're piloting and seeing it as a true pilot if we haven't finished the system. And I just think closing that loop for school leaders in terms of what this year was meant to be will probably help and go a long way. And for me as a board member.
Yes, I will ask Kirsten to respond to our approach around floors and targets, but I do want to say something about the level of engagement and where we find ourselves today. And I do think Treasurer Wright, you intimated this earlier in the questions and answers. I personally and our staff have been very committed to engaging LEAs to get to both an understanding of what we are trying to do, but to gather real feedback about how to enhance and make a tool that really represents what I think is a shared commitment around accountability. Did we hope that we would have been able to put forward a framework earlier? Absolutely. But we heard real feedback from our schools at the time that we were moving too fast then. And so we appropriately slowed down to make sure not only did we get it right, but that what we considered right was a reflection of real deliberation with schools, not expecting that we would all agree and that we would get to consensus, but that we would certainly get closer to something that we could all understand, appreciate, and work toward. So that was the intent in our shifting timeline. I will also identify that while we appreciate the feedback that we got from 58 LEAs, I want to note that after 2 years of a lot of conversation about this, there were only 4 areas of concern identified in that letter, most of which we are already working on and are able to implement. And so I think that that is a true testimony to the work of my team and the active engagement of LEAs that we are at this part in the process where we're talking about 4 areas of concern. I also want to acknowledge that we are still in robust conversation about high schools, and I could imagine that the high schools perhaps feel this more, it's more palatable for the high schools because as of Friday, we were still talking about some measure shifts, all in the spirit of making it better and responsive to what we heard. But it is true that we have been in this process. We have not had a lot of conversation about the pre-K-8 framework to this point. I think that there's a lot more consensus and perhaps knowledge about that. But yes, we have some more way to go on the high school framework, and I think we can actually get there within the next couple of weeks. So I just wanted to frame that as I talk about like why we find ourselves where we are today. I do think that we have tried along the way to indicate to LEAs where we are, what our proposal is based on. To the extent that there have been changes, we've communicated why, and all of it has been in service of getting to a tool that they can better understand. But I will ask Kirsten to speak to the floors and targets.
Thank you, Dr. Arca-Davis. So the floors and targets, when we shared simulated outcomes with schools last month, they received floors and targets that we used to simulate the outcomes. So they are based on school year 22-23 data. We have different approaches to floors and targets. They are 10th and 90th percentile of either state or sector level performance. Some of them are aspirational targets with 10th percentile floors. Some of them are based on national performance. What we were proposing, or what we have proposed in the technical guide, was using those school year 22-23 outcomes and floors and targets, to hold for 3 years and then update them or recalculate them in 3 years. Something that we heard from schools was that the year that we would be updating those floors and targets is the same year that we would be public with Aspire, school year 25-26. So
because it's 3 years from 22-23.
Correct.
Not 3 years from launching of the Aspire.
The actual Aspire, right.
Okay.
And so that was something that we heard from schools. And so then we talked about what that would look like with using holding those 22-23 floors and targets for 4 years to start, so that schools would have an idea of what those floors and targets are going into that first public year. Something that we also have been talking about, or something that I think other people aren't always considering, is we use data from OSSE for many of our measures, and those state level floors and targets come from OSSE. They have their own cycle for when they update those floors and targets based on ESSA. And so making sure that we are aligned to either behind them or ahead of them, preferably behind, so that we can get the data after it's already available, is another consideration to make sure that the timelines match up. So that's what we proposed. We have been hearing some concerns about changing the floors and targets for that first public year, and we are consulting or deliberating on alternatives to doing that.
Very helpful. Thank you. And yes, thank you, Dr. Walker Davis, for your portion as well, because I don't want us to ever miss how much engagement went into this. And that was a result of the extended timeline, which I continue to share with school leaders as well. I think that, because I think that work was critical work that needed to happen too. Thank you.
Thank you. I think our new board member has a question, and then we're going to get back over to you, Nick, and then
Thank you, Leah. Melody, you mentioned that growth was not a metric that you observed that was measured across the country. Can you elaborate on that observation and speak to us a little bit about that?
I will. I'll touch the surface and then Kirsten can elaborate. So it's not to say that that was specific to high school, and it's not to say that states aren't using growth at all, but by majority of state authorizers, state education offices are not focused on growth among high school. They are focused on achievement because that is the terminal experience for a student's education. And so the goal is really making sure that you're exiting students who are ready for college and career.
And I just want to be clear, when you say focus on, are you specifically using the word focus in tying that to a percentage, or you're saying that they're not including that in their accountability framework at all?
In some instances, it's not included. In other instances, it is a diminished aspect.
Kirsten, I'm wondering if you could just speak to the research that you did on states and, states' accountability systems.
So I did do that. It was actually the high school leaders submitted a proposal of requests to us to consider back in February. And one of their requests was to do a landscape analysis of measures that high school or that authorizers or state education agencies use to measure high school progress. And so thankfully I had already done it. And what I found was that, as Melody said, there are many states that have no growth measure for high school at all. It's just not part of how they're evaluating high schools. The ones that do have it, generally there are the vast majority of schools, state education agencies that use or measure high school progress use median growth percentile or student growth percentile measures based on state assessments, based on end of course assessments, based on PSAT to SAT and pre-ACT to ACT, those kinds of things. And then there's a couple of other states that do different things. There are a few states that use value-added measures, and then a couple of states that do something that would be like the equivalent of level growth, like students who grow from park level 1 to park level 2, that kind of thing. And then there's like some other kind of made up measures that that some states have figured out how they want to measure growth. One of them I will name, Indiana uses something that's like growth to proficiency, and Nebraska uses a reduction of non-proficient students, which I thought was an interesting idea. And then California, Kentucky, and New York all use a form of weighted achievement. So this came up a long time ago, but basically they don't actually measure growth. They just assign differentiated weights to students at each level. So for example, a student that earns a level 1 in Park would be worth, and not worth as the student, but their score would be worth a fraction of a point. And it would increase as you get to proficient. So proficient students are worth 1 point. And as you the further away you get from proficiency, you are a reduced fraction. So that's what I found. Again, a lot of states don't measure it at all.
So just thank you for that. And I just want to put a button on this and to be clear for my own edification and for the purposes of the record. So what I think I hear you saying is that in its current iteration, this idea of growth as a metric would put DC in the minority in terms of looking at this particular measurement.
Technically, yes.
Thank you. Nick?
Hopefully a positive minority or a positive outlier. I think that's what we'd be aiming for, right? Yes. But I hear you, Board Member Bede. I think it just depends how you look at it. But I think there's been there's been a sort of a demand for this for some time. So I have a few things. But by way of clarification on the pilot year thing, and apologies to keep beating this drum melody, just so I understand, just from the panelists, I heard a sort of two different things they seem to be asking for. If I distill it, in the current policy we're contemplating, it's publish in 24-25 and then consequences in 25-26. Okay, you're shaking your head already. So that I'm already but consequences, actually listening to you, it feels as if it's actually hard to draw a line and say there's such a thing as a year when consequences start, because it's nuanced about how it's used in your record and other things like that. So I think that's part of the challenge here is there's not a linear year when that happens, as it were. But for the first, am I right about the first one? Publish in 24 versus publish in 25 is kind of what they're asking about.
So there's the school year and then there's the reporting year. And the reporting year is always the year after the school year. Yep. So 24-25 is the school year. The reporting year is 25-26. They are asking us to do reporting beginning in the 26-27 school year based off of performance in 25-26.
Yeah. And the way you would think about consequences would simply be when and how these get incorporated into the record for looking at charter goals.
Well, two matters. So schools that are already have adopted the PMF as their goals will by default will use the Aspire system for their goals. And if that's the case, then we would expect them to achieve a level 3 on their charter goals in the 24-25 school year, or demonstrate improvement within level 4 compared to their performance on the simulated 23-24 Aspire outcomes. Then there's another aspect of the technical guide that speaks to how PCSB generally will respond to performance on the Aspire system. And it mirrors the language that is in the PMF, where we talk about sort of increased monitoring, increased conversations, and ultimately the potential for initiating the charter revocation process. That last ramped up consequence is reserved for schools that are deemed level 5. That would be the lowest level of performance. And so far, we really don't have very many schools falling into that level, at least with the simulated data.
Yep. Right. Okay. So let me just try out some thinking here, and just me. I think where I think I land on this, and would love to hear what your all's position is. So I understand the kind of position of our schools and our panelists around giving us time, making sure there's a transition. I think I am nervous about delaying too long. I think I'm nervous about sort of delaying when we start using the data and when we give students and families access to this data, right? I think those are both really compelling, important interests. I think if I think about sort of the timeline here, someone said it's a once a decade thing so far, right? Iteration number 2 took us another decade. We're talking about 3-4 years of implementation. And then when do we have to start designing the next framework? I'm wondering how long the shelf life will be on this one. So those are all reasons I'm concerned, right? And add to that the fact that we haven't really had good data or accountability around it for, it will have been 6 or 7 years by the time sort of we're into full implementation. Those are all things that I think weigh on me. And it feels to me like, I think we can debate about the whole publication question. I think that's fair. Although again, I think there's a student and family interest in receiving and knowing this data. I actually think that in my view, it feels as if you're taking an approach of, let's not hold off on starting to apply the data, but let's instead, through the multiple pathways, create nuanced ways that those rules can be applied, such that we're not going to have sort of unintentionally overly punitive consequences. And I feel as if that's actually a better approach. I'd rather have nuanced application of the data than no application at all. And it feels as if that's the approach you've struck. So let me just ask you, what do you think of that? How do you, how strongly should we weight some of the testimony we've gotten today on that question?
I think the testimony is absolutely worthwhile, but as an authorizer, I do have like personal discomfort, and that discomfort is based off of 10 years working at PCSB and seeing the most recent years of not having accountability in a public way, and having difficulty making assessments when it comes to doing high stakes reviews and renewals in this season of having limited data. It is not ideal, and it is falls short of our responsibility to the public. It's really important. I think like we have set out to design an accountability system that is different than the DC state report card. Again, there are lots of similarities between the two systems, but we have deliberately designed something that we want the board to use, and we hope that families will use as well when they're making school choice decisions. And that's sort of part of the bargain. Like Treasurer Wright said earlier, that, schools sign up, they have autonomy, but they also have an accountability. And right now we are not delivering, at least at full speed, with the accountability side of things. There's also some like historical context that I'm thinking about right now about the adult ed framework. So 2018, we did a significant overhaul on that framework, and the 18-19 school year was the first year that we implemented it. We did not do a pilot on it. And so I think that that's just yet another instance of moving forward with a full-fledged system, even though the year prior was an opportunity for development and simulation of that system.
And Board Member Rodriguez, I do want to underscore that I did find the concerns and the testimony of our LEA leaders compelling. And I, both here in this forum and in other instances, school leaders have been able to articulate what that year would look like and how they would use that information. And I do hope that that is true, that they would use that information in that way to really inform resource allocation and adjustments to scheduling and all of these other pieces. I would also like to speak to what we would use the year to do. So you heard testimony tonight about our communication to boards. So we plan to engage school boards on what this framework means, what it does, how they might be able to use it in their deliberations, either on an academic committee or as a full board. We have a commitment to targeting all of our stakeholders to inform them about what this framework is. And we plan to use this year to do that as well. And I want to say that while I appreciate that there are real concerns around the consequences, I'm going to go off script here and say that I would invite folks to also think about this as not just consequences, but a lifeline. So what you were saying in terms of our nuanced approach of having multiple ways that schools can demonstrate attainment of goals, we have been very thoughtful about not just having one pathway to do that, knowing that it will take time for folks to understand how to operate under this system, tempering when we do public reporting versus having a way to demonstrate that you are moving toward, ideally, the highest level of performance on this framework. And so I do think we've thought about it, not in terms of consequences, but what are the ways that you can demonstrate that you are moving toward the level of achievement that we would want to see under the framework. And that might not land with our LEAs as a lifeline, but that is the thinking that we have been thinking, that we put into both what we proposed in the tech guide and what you'll see in the charter goals policy.
I really would prefer nuanced application to no application, I think. But Dr. Walker-Davis, what you're saying is how we would use the year as in under currently contemplated policy, right? That's what we're planning to do without changing anything.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, great. That's helpful.
One thing that has helped me over the last few minutes of making sense of school years, reporting years, I even tried writing this year, next year, was putting down, making it more concrete. So 1920 is the last school year data that has been used.
1819,
1819.
published in November 2019.
Okay. So that means in 1819, I'll have to redo all what I wrote down here. A child who's in 3rd grade, which is the first year of statewide annual testing, in 1819 is in what grade now? Oh, actually, not even now. By the time the year that the data would be used, which is 25, 26, they're in
9th grade.
9th grade. So they are no longer in a
No longer,
year with
yeah.
required testing. So
Yeah.
when does my
Whole
kids'
generation.
data count?
Yeah.
I don't have a child of this age right now, but I would like us to have the perspective of a parent with a child in the system who has chosen these schools, because these schools, their charter, which is a contract, is based on a set of promises of how that school is going to deliver the best out of my kid and set them on that path. I'm a little uncomfortable with this 26, 27 based on 25, 26. That child's practically out of our system at that point. So just I urge us to make concrete in that way how we're thinking about implementation here. When I first heard Lifeline just then, I was thinking about kids. So there's a lot we have to balance here. And those who provided testimony tonight, we had one parent, and I'm sure some of the other folks who provided testimony are also parents, but it is a really important perspective for us to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry.
you have one more? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Sorry, this was I figured I'd be actually, you know what? We can come back to me. I think actually. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna hit y'all with 3 and then I'll go back on mute. So first and foremost, I will always say this. I want to commend the staff for all of the work that you all have put into this framework. I always come to this from my lens as a former school leader, as a kid who grew up here and watched the system transform, and now a parent. And having sat through the PMF and now this, again, tremendous gratitude to the staff and tremendous gratitude to school leaders as well in their thoughtful engagement and the pushing that they've done to have these type of conversations and to be, wrestling with some really important pieces here just speaks to the commitment. So I'm not questioning commitment from our staff, nor am I questioning commitment from school leaders. But here's my next point. I just want to state on the record, as silly as this may sound, I want us to be clear. What Aspire is going to measure is stuff that people are doing anyway. This is not brand new. We're not doing nothing brand new. We're not building anything brand new. Aspire literally measures what you have been doing, what you purport to have been doing, what you are doing, full stop. Now, I know that that is said simply and somewhat flippantly. I do understand that there are consequences. I definitely understand consequences associated when schools don't hit their, metrics. But at the end of the day, we talk about the charters that schools receive. We talk about the incredible investments financially with public trust and everything like that goes into us having this very robust school sector. And so I want to continue to encourage school leaders from the dais here. I get it. I really get it, and I really understand what it is that you're trying to do in terms of setting your schools up for success. However, it is for me, it's unconscionable to know that a kid who entered school and started testing at 3rd grade, by the time this is all said and done, and what is being proposed, they're entering 9th grade, not having any kind of understanding before they start taking some, preparing to take assessments that also have additional implications on their life. And we need to know how our kids are performing so we can meet their need as immediately as possible. So that's my first statement. Second one, really quick, the differences between Aspire, PMF, and the DC State Report Card, really quickly, not even in depth. What is the communication plan or the education plan rather for boards for families, for schools around the differences and similarities. That's sort of connected to my first point around, like, again, we're not doing anything new. We're not asking schools to approach educating children in a new way. These are things that they've been doing. These are things that we've measured before. What does that education and communications plan look like? Really quickly. And then I have one more question and I'm out of the way.
Yes, I will try to be quick here. First, as this board knows, we had a roundtable in December with our state superintendent, which I think went a long way in helping to explain what the similarities and differences might be between the state accountability system and our accountability system as an authorizer, where there are similarities, where there are differences, and why it's important for us to have both. So I'm glad to have a partner in the state superintendent around this work. And at the staff level, we're so that we can elevate where there are similarities and differences. We currently have on our Aspire webpage a chart that shows the similarities and differences between the OSSI state framework and PCSB. We have many of the same measures, except for pre-K and adult, which OSSI does not measure as non-compulsory grades. So that is unique to our framework. We have some of the similar categories of performance. Where you'll see major differences might be in the, I'm not sure why my Mac keeps going off, but where you might see differences is in the weighting of particular measures. We might weight something more or less than our framework versus OSSI. Both of our frameworks do disaggregate by student group, and at a high level, I'm trying to think, and of course, OSSI does not have school-specific measures, which our framework will have. So those are the high points, but there's a more detailed analysis of each of the pieces of our framework on our website.
Yes, Dr. Walker Davis, I definitely understand that. I guess what I'm asking is, again, what does the rollout, the education rollout to, like, I know the website, but where else will we give information to boards, instructing them on the differences between the PMF, Aspire, and the DC? Yeah.
Yes, so we're actually going to have targeted sessions with school LEA boards. We are partnering also with education board partners to support us in that work. And so we will have sessions similar to the one that one of our witnesses testified on that we did in the summer. Last summer, we plan to do a couple of those engagements specifically targeted to LEA boards. Similarly, we'll have conversations with other stakeholder groups, and we're looking to partner with other folks like PAVE to do targeted work with parents and parent groups.
Excellent. My last question for the evening is around this for now, maybe. How do you all respond to critiques that the Aspire system is designed to limit the number of schools identified as high performing? How do you react? Yeah.
So there are no limits under the Aspire system. I think the key difference, and we've spoken about this quite a bit, is that it's a transition from 3 tiers to 5 levels. So that means we have an opportunity to really break down the performance. The thresholds under the PMF were so wide that there was a lot of variation in performance even within a tier. And so by expanding the number of levels to 5, it gives us an opportunity to really zero in and have classified, zeroed in reflection of school quality that we just don't have with the PMF. But it doesn't actually mean that there's like a limit on how many schools can be level 1 or level 2, for example.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I think, again, as we think about parents making decisions for their kids, as we just think about what we celebrate and how we celebrate, that type of nuance is going to be critical, so that folks can really kind of get a true sense of what's happening. So thank you for explaining that. And thank you again for you all's work in building that. All right. Do I say yield to Board Member Rodriguez? Is that okay, go ahead.
Well, wait, I was yielding to y'all, so I don't know about going to Nick before you come back to me.
Okay, so I'm yielding right back
But
to you.
I know Lee and Jim also haven't spoken either. So
Okay, well, I'm yielding to whoever needs it next.
This is important. I think that's what we should all see. This is important conversation for a really high stakes thing. But Lee and Jim, if you're not going to talk, I have a question.
I'm okay right now. I thought Nick was about to go, but Jim, no? Okay.
So Okay, and then Nick, I'll come back to you. So one of the things that I heard that came up was around the school specific performance category. And one, I think that is another thing that when you talk about sets DC out in terms of a framework that really is a unique way of evaluating schools, but also allowing schools to show what's important about them, what matters for them in terms of their own uniqueness, right? We talk a lot about not wanting all our schools to be cookie cutters, but can you tell us more based off the presentation? Those measures won't be included for the first 2 years. And one, why is that? And then without those measures, how is that either impacting levels or misrepresenting the school's actual performance? That's one, to be like Shakur, that's one of my questions.
Okay, I'll take it. So like you said, the school-specific measures assess aspects of the school that may not otherwise be captured in the framework, and typically are unique to each LEA, right? So staff is proposing to allow the necessary time to negotiate meaningful metrics. We know personal, local, immediate, it's taken a long time to get here. And we don't want to throw together measures for everybody and end up with something that loses the integrity of the intent of the measures, right? So there was a lot of conversations during task force meetings. While many school leaders supported school-specific measures, there were a lot of questions and a lot of narrative around easy points. And while that's not the sentiment, we are hoping for schools to find measures and metrics that speak to the things that they're doing well. And so once they're negotiated, we do anticipate that out of those 10 points, schools are getting almost all of them, if not all of them. Until we get to the point where we have negotiated with all of our LEAs these two measures, we are proposing the maximum points available be 90 instead of 100. And I don't think that not having those measures is a misrepresentation of schools, because we're still evaluating them in the other categories. We're still evaluating them in school progress, school achievement, and school environment. But I do think it's important for us to take the necessary time to make sure that the measures that each LEA has is meaningful and is right for them.
And it's going to take 2 years because of the timeline of reporting out, not because we plan to wait 2 years to create the negotiation tool or the
correct.
Okay, so I think that's important to note as well, right? Like it is, we'll know how we get there, but getting through everybody.
So it's really more the negotiation is for the next year, and then the following year of performance will include those measures. And then the year after that, which is 26, 27, would have the measures in it from 25, 26.
Okay, say that one more time. Now I'm also thinking about Leah's with the little third grader who say it again.
Okay, so really it's from this summer to next summer, we are negotiating. We have as many LEAs as we have. We got to get it for everybody. And ahead of the following school year, which is the 25, 26 school year, they will have their measures in place and they will be evaluated on them when we report in the following school year after that.
Yeah. Okay. Just like we talked about limiting the high performing schools, can you respond to the concern that Aspire, I actually appreciate Secretary Board Member Fanion's response that like, we're not measuring things that schools shouldn't have been doing anyway, but there have been stated concerns that Aspire is creating new high stakes consequences for weak or unsatisfactory school performance, right? And sort of the unspoken around that. Can you just address that and how you all are thinking about that? Is that something you've discussed and looked at to check for?
So what I think this boils down to is a misunderstanding from school leaders or other community folks who just weren't familiar with the language in the performance management technical guide. The Aspire Tech Guide almost verbatim uses the same language as the PMF technical guide does as far as consequences for underperformance. So in the PMF technical guide for Tier 3 performance, we discuss doing a qualitative site review. We discuss having an engagement meeting between PCSB board members and staff with the school's board members and staff, and then ultimately the potential for initiating the charter revocation process. Under the Aspire system for levels 4 and 5, which map to Tier 3, we make the same sort of recommendations for how we would respond to level 4 and 5 performance. So it starts with some softer but more frequent touches when it's a level 4. So we would potentially do a QSR visit, and then we would potentially engage with the school's board to have a conversation about the school's performance. And then when you get down to level 5 performance, that's when we would definitely do a QSR, most likely engage with the school's board, and then potentially ask the board to initiate the charter revocation process. It's important to note that those consequences are consistent with the School Reform Act. This is not new authority that we are exerting through the Aspire system. It is consistent with existing policy.
Okay. And then just to put on again, former school leader hat, one of the things that I think schools value greatly in order to understand where they will fall under Aspire is the calculator and or simulated metrics. Right now, I know we just did that last week or earlier in the month, right? We did some outcomes. Do schools currently have access to a calculator or some way to simulate their own performance, right? As like Shakur, I remember being before this board when our schools dropped, and I knew we needed to make some real gains, and we used that tool to help us figure out what that would look like. Do schools have access to that now, or some sort of way to simulate the metrics under Aspire? And then I'm yielding to you, Nick. So you'll see I'm going on mute.
So thank you for that question. Schools had a calculator that we developed for them to use in November, I believe we released it. It was based on the model at the time, and it was based on school year 21-22 data. The thing that I want to kind of, introduce is with a more complex system comes a more complex calculator. And because we are measuring school performance based on enrollment, so student group performance and such, those kinds of things are static for that year. And we know that schools' environments or schools' student populations change over time. So each year, if there were a new calculator, it would be based on enrollment of the previous year. And there are, something like 75 different inputs that a school would have to do in order to simulate an outcome. Because for every measure, I think Ms. Brantley was talking about high school has 21 measures. So for each measure, you also have each student group for that measure that you have to input that performance. And so it is complicated, and it is something that we've been talking about. I know that with the PMF, schools have been used to having a calculator annually. We have been making sure that at every as many points as possible, we have provided simulated outcomes that give a picture of where a school might perform. But internally, we would need to decide about what kind of commitment we could make to producing a calculator every year, because it is not just the each calculator is specific to each school, right? So every campus has its own customized calculator because the student group weights are specifically around race and ethnicity are variable based on the school's enrollment. So each time we create a calculator, it's not just one calculator that we're making, it's 135. And so right now, they do not have access to a new calculator. We have talked about the possibility of releasing one after the vote that can be used for simulating next year's outcomes.
And just to repeat a tiny part of that, there would be 135 different calculators. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, minus alternative schools.
Right. Okay.
And
There
just
would
to
be several dozen.
Yes, just to put a finer point, we have provided simulated outcomes with the current proposed frameworks to all of our LEAs. We are still having some, except our adult education schools. We are committed to thinking about what tool we can provide schools once the board has voted on the framework. I want to be clear that I did not commit to doing that while we were still thinking about measures that might change, just because, as Kirsten mentioned, that's 130 some odd frameworks, and every one element requires a complete shift in the calculator. So we are certainly going to provide one after the vote. I think the question would be, how frequently can we do a calculator for schools? And we might want to consider, if floors and targets are remaining the same, could it be built in such a way that the burden of that manipulation is more on the school side versus us producing an annual calculator. So that's what we are deliberating on, but we are committed, if there are significant changes to the framework, to provide those simulated outcomes so schools understand how they perform under what is actually voted on.
Thank you. Very helpful.
And I'm sorry, Dr. Walker Davis, could you, the finance person in me peaks when you just said what you said. You said there's a different calculator for every LEA, or there's a different calculator. Explain that again.
Kirsten might have to explain that again, but I will give it a try. Because of the student group weighting and the shifts depending on what percentage of which group you have in your school, it will look different at every school, even within an LEA that has multiple campuses. So there are unique elements of every school's calculator, and so it has to be designed in such a way that it can meet those unique elements. So that's what we mean by having 130 some odd, because it has to be not just LEA specific, but campus specific.
Because each campuses, you're measuring them differently.
The measures are the same, the student demographics are different.
Thank you.
All right, so just a few last things from me to pick up the last points from the panelists. So first of all, I would agree they asked for more calculators sooner. Within reason, I think we can all agree that would be a great thing in terms of a tool for LEAs, as you say, in terms of your timeline and when it makes sense given the work involved. Secondly, on school selected metrics, just to pick up what Treasurer Wright said, I would be interested in finding a way for this to happen sooner rather than later, but I wouldn't want that to come at the expense of the time it takes you to negotiate goals. One wondering I have is, in the spirit of, we might not be able to grant everything about the request for a true pilot year, but I wonder about piloting those metrics, right? Like, and just saying, we're actually not going to take your using a metric as a sign that we've approved it or negotiated it and said yes to you, but sure, try it, right, this year. We can simulate what it would have done in the framework, right? We can learn a lot. but we reserve the right to then actually negotiate with you what it actually will be later. So in the spirit of piloting, you could introduce it sooner, but without stakes, essentially. So that's just an idea to think about. And then thirdly, I just wanted to pick up the educator retention point, which we talked about at the very beginning. I am interested in this one. I'm very sympathetic to the argument that they made. I know there were a lot of trade-offs here. I would say just if you could think about a few things. We know that the measures do change over time, even within the life of a framework. So I would urge us to consider that in the sort of first time we come around to that a few years from now, as it were. But again, combining some of the earlier points about piloting, I wonder, right, like if there's something around developing that gold standard measure of both retention and the representation gap to track sort of educators of color. And I wonder if including that as like a pre-approved school-specific measure, right, that we feel good about and is validated, that would not only give schools the freedom to select a metric like that, it would also pave the way towards deciding if we want to include it in a future iteration of the framework as well. So those are like just thoughts I had listening to the testimony and then listening to some of your responses to the earlier questions. You don't need to tell me your position on them now, but I think they're worth dialogue over the course of the next few weeks.
Your thinking is similar to mine. I see this as an opportunity to incorporate as a school-specific measure, and we are pretty excited about creating a bank of potential measures that school leaders can draw from. I think this would be a really interesting one, and I think there's some richness that I think we can expect from seeing how school-specific measures play out over time, and it might be an opportunity for us to move them into a formal part of the frameworks.
Yeah, fantastic. And so go ahead, Kirsten.
I was just going to say that we have one of our guiding principles is to focus on student outcomes as opposed to inputs, but NACSA recommends doing an academic framework, a financial framework, and an organizational framework. And the organizational framework, it speaks to things like that would include things like teacher retention. And I think that I've thought for a long time, it's something worth us thinking about. And to your point about making it a school specific measure or putting it in the bank, as Melody said, I do think as we are defining the parameters for those measures, we have talked about extending the bounds to input measures that would be appropriate.
Well, and I like the idea of schools kind of balancing the long term and the short term, right? And in the same way that, not exactly analogous, but in the way that growth is a leading indicator of proficiency, which is what we're ultimately after.
Right.
The research shows teacher retention and retention of teachers of color is a leading indicator of proficiency too, right? So there's an argument for it, but I get why it's delicate. So we're worth looking at. Yeah.
I also want to reject the idea that we're going to do this again in 2 years.
Yeah. What I meant by that was that my understanding
I don't receive that.
Yeah, sorry. I think I just mean that my understanding is that from time to time we'll consider tweaking what's in the framework. And I imagine with a bank of really interesting school specific measures, there could be a really good process for that. What kind of gets moved in, moved out, that kind of thing. So
absolutely. And we've talked about the life cycle of a school specific measure and how long those would last for a particular LEA and how frequently we allow schools to update those. And so all of those things are have been happening in the deliberations that we've been having.
That's great. So I just want to close by echoing everyone else and thanking you all. I actually think it's a monumental achievement to look at the spirit in which today's feedback was given, even in the LEA letter, 58 LEAs, very constructive. It's a testament to the work you all have done with this community. And I just want to thank you all for it.
Yes.
I said I didn't have anything. Kirsten, for the high school, I know that is still a issue in terms of that framework and hearing from those leaders. You all had the meeting last week. Did they then receive? I get it, it's only Monday, and I think the meeting was just Friday, right? So I want to be realistic that we did not expect you to work. When will they then receive follow-up in terms of any decisions that were either agreed upon or you need to follow up on, whether that's new metrics, measures, et cetera? When will they hear back? Yeah.
So we have 2 planned communications for high schools. We're planning by the end of this week to provide them with the detailed business rules for the proposed updated measures that we had, and kind of a summary of what we discussed. And then next week, we are planning to provide them with updated simulations of their outcomes. So with these adjustments to specific measures, what would their outcomes look like? The other thing that we wanted to share is kind of like side by side of this is how you performed and this is then, and this is how you would perform now. So kind of the—
When you say then, you mean based off the outcome that was given a month ago?
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
So what the new distribution would be, we did some of that during the meeting, kind of when we adjust this measure with these new business rules, X number of schools increased in the percentage of points they earned, X percentage of schools stayed the same. We kind of gave an overview of that, but what we plan to do next week is provide them with their school specific outcomes that have it all laid out like we previously did in February.
Okay. Which again, I think it just underscores what I said earlier and what all of us have been saying, right? Like the real, okay, my dog wanted to say, the real feedback that, you know, when we hear it, we're being responsive to it and trying to, you know, make adjustments accordingly, which then also impacts timeline and the ability to get to a final decision. And not to say that we should not do those things and have these conversations. I don't want to in any way insinuate that, but I do think that when you hear you know, give us more time, or panelists saying we need more time, this is how we begin to start to use time. And then I do, and we'll probably always think about that third grader in 1819, right? In terms of what that is. And at the end of the day, that's the obligation that we have. It is to that third grader from 1819. So thank you for your continued hard work on this to everyone. And I really do believe that we get, as LEAs, a lot of autonomy, and to do the things that, as Shakur said, we've always been doing in exchange for some real accountability. And we've got to be accountable to that little third grader. Leah, you got to give him or her a name, or that child a name. Thank you for your time.
Echoing gratitude to everyone. I'm going to wrap this up with 3 things. One is that this, as we've shared in timelines before, this is not our first rodeo with the performance management framework. This body, folks before us, built, I'd argue the first, someone might say Massachusetts beat us to it, but first real performance management framework of some kind, an effort to evaluate school performance, which is, by the way, the brass ring of education policy, way back in 2008, I think. So this one is really like 3.0. And there's going to be a 3.1, it's going to be 3.2. It'll be far more than 2 years, Kirsten, before we get to a 4.0. But this discussion tonight has been fantastic. Thank you to the staff, to Melody and Kirsten, for what you've done to make this conversation possible, which is a whole lot of work, but there's a lot of folks who aren't on this tonight that has made this conversation possible. For the folks that recommended that we tweak our public comment process so that we could be able to hear in this way and be able to engage with each other in this way. Thank you for that. Lively, productive, grappling with realities. And I just want to name that we are modeling what being responsive to a diverse array of school communities looks like. Treasurer Chantel mentioned earlier a question around standardized tool. But in no way is any one of these tools going to be standardized one size fits all. I heard 100 and something different calculators that we are responding to the realities of community needs, what each school looks like. We've got one school environments and we've got many school environments. This is elevated transparency that I'd argue models not just for our city, but other public bodies in the country. And I'm quite proud to sit among you. So thank you. The third point here is that we will have our second public hearing on Aspire coming up in just a few weeks on April 8th. So thank you, Dr. Walker Davis, who's led all of this. Melody and Kirsten, for your time this evening, for all of our presenters earlier tonight. We look forward to continuing this with our staff, school leaders, and the public ahead of the June 10th vote. There's more. Next on our agenda are charter amendment requests. These requests are to allow LEAs to make changes to their charter contracts. First, for that, I will yield the floor to Hannah Cousineau, Senior Manager of Sector Planning and Compliance, to introduce the request from DC Wildflower Public Charter School. And I'd also like to invite up representatives from the school to provide remarks regarding this amendment request: Rachel Kimboko, Cliff Bussey, and Jordan Kersetter, and Neil Campbell.
Good evening.
Oh, I see Neil now, Rochelle, Cliff, and Jordan as well. We're ready to go. Hello, my name is Hannah Cousineau, and I am a Senior Manager in the School Performance Department. Tonight, the board will hear from DC Wildflower Public Charter School regarding its request to open its second facility site. Per its charter agreement, the school has conditional approval to operate up to 6 facilities with a total enrollment ceiling of 225 students in grades pre-kindergarten 3 through 5. Currently, DC Wildflower Public Charter School operates a single facility, the Riverseed School, at 913 55th Street Northeast in Ward 7. The school seeks to open a second facility named Blue Montessori at 1516 Marionberry Avenue Southeast in Ward 8. At capacity, this facility will enroll 30 students in grades pre-kindergarten 3 through kindergarten. Based on DC PCSB staff's preliminary analysis, DC Wildflower Public Charter School has met the conditions to open the Blue Montessori facility. Representatives from the school are here to present and answer your questions.
Hannah, shall I present, or do you want to? Okay, great.
Yes, let me know if you're having trouble sharing your screen.
Here I am. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Cruzy and board members. Hannah, I'm very excited to be here to introduce Blue Montessori. My name is Rochelle Kimboko. I'm the Executive Director of DC Wildflower. And as you know, and you just heard, we're chartered to open up to 5 more sites over the next few years and grow to about 225 students between pre-K 3 and 5th grade. Our first site is currently fully enrolled at 28 students and plans to grow to 50 plus students. We have spent the last year working with Cliff and Jordan on their micro school and have done things from introduce the TLs to our board, teacher leaders, to our board and to you all. Find a facility, build a budget that shows us sustainable 5-year charter cash flow, and also do outreach and recruitment. I'm going to stop talking and let you hear from the teacher leaders. I think Cliff is next.
Yes, thank you, Rochelle. Good evening, board members. Good evening, folks that's watching. My name is Clifford Bussey, and I'm truly excited to be here. I'm also elated to be adding to the Scholastic Options in Anacostia. As a seasoned teacher, I've been working in the DC school system for 10 years, starting with working with infants all the way up to high schoolers, most of those years I spent in early childhood, including my own independent school in 2020 and summer camp where I was able to host one of the foundation's members' child there. So in my time in Ward 8, previously in Congress Heights, Skyland, which is now Ward 7, and now Anacostia, I have been teaching yoga at the Anacostia Art Center for free intentionally. I've been performing as a musician at the Anacostia Playhouse, over at the Anacostia Community Museum, and I've also used that time to help children develop skills in the high school sector that will give them an opportunity to excel financially as adults. I'm really excited to open up Blue Montessori here in this neighborhood. Number one, because my daughter lives here. And number two, I just want to be a part of the conversation of the great shifts and movements that's been happening in Anacostia. Our model, the micro school model, is very unique in that the parents, when they're talking to me and my co-teacher, my co-founder, they're also talking to the school leaders. So we're able to respond to parents' feedback quickly and competently, often nimbly, so that we can get the desired output that they're asking for. With the Montessori model, we're able to follow each child individually. It's baked into the model. So working with children with various needs is something that we're fully prepared to do. It's something that I do currently in my role as a special education teacher, and it's something that my co-partner does as a special education teacher as well. So now I'm going to pass that mic over to my co-teacher.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Appreciate you taking the time to have us here. My name is Jordan Kerstetter. I am a proud Ward 7 resident. I have taught previously in Ward 8, as well as Ward 5 through previous charter schools here in the district. And, you know, like Cliff said, we want to be integrated within the community. And so we are not residents that are just jumping in to open this school. Cliff is very connected. I volunteer for DC Natives, which is an organization that primarily focuses on Ward 7 and Ward 8 of planting pollinator gardens for residents for free. My daughter has been a part of summer camps that focus on the Anacostia River Trail. So it's that community is important to us. And through our story and our journey in education, as well as who we are really invested in reaching partnerships and relationships in order to serve the children and the families of Anacostia through Blue Montessori School. So we have done some outreach within the community, specifically some like what is Montessori, giving, there was a few pictures on the previous slide of events we held at the neighborhood library, Anacostia Neighborhood Library. We were invited by the neighborhood library and NPD to come and be a part of Beat the Streets even before we were Blue Montessori, when we had the idea in our head. And just it's through those discussions and those face-to-face discussions that we really understand there are families who are excited for kind of a new concept of a micro school in their neighborhood. So just partnering that Montessori education belief and the micro school concept, we have actually reached interest of over 60 families who have already applied for our 20 spots that we'll have open for fall 24, 25, that's crazy to say, and serving pre-K 3 and pre-K 4. So thank you for, again, allowing us to present. We can open up for questions that you have. So thank you.
Thank you, Wildflower and Blue team, for your presentation this evening. And I think this graphic is new. I like yes, this watercolor DC, and it's a wildflower. That's wonderful. I'll kick it off with an opening question. I believe that there had been an application for this school a couple years ago, and then it had been withdrawn. Can you remind me about this? And this was a second facility, right, that was going to be opened, and then that application was withdrawn. Can you remind me about that?
Yeah, we had two teams. So last year, 2 years ago, actually, this time, we had two teams working. Cliff and Jordan were one of the teams that were already starting to think about joining DC Wildflower. For Cliff and Jordan, they were just starting their training. And so they had started to have conversations with us about it. The other team did withdraw. So we did have a team that we thought would be interested and ready. And they decided, because of stuff that was happening in their personal life. If you remember, they were a couple. And they had a couple personal life situations that made it not be a good choice for them. So I will say we were not exactly happy to not be able to expand last year, but I do think it ended up being a wonderful opportunity for us to really hone in on what we're doing this year with Riverseed School. So we've learned a lot in this year as well.
Thank you.
We received a letter on February 22nd from Dr. Carleen Reed, the State Board of Education member from Ward 8, opposing your request. Have you responded to her concerns in any way?
We did respond. I am sorry we did not share that response with you. We did respond to Dr. Reed. I would say I will defer to Cliff to share a little bit more about the response in particular to him. But I think one of the things that we that I made sure we responded was to share that we actually have had strong academic performance in our first year between both the performance of the students as well as the performance of the classroom were very strong. And so in her assertion that we didn't have any reason to believe that we were successful and shouldn't expand, we responded both, well, in fact, we do have success to talk about, and two, that our model is to grow one classroom at a time. And so it was not, we're not bringing a whole building to a community, we're bringing a single classroom. And that is part of our model. I don't know, Cliff, if you want to share more about your response to Dr. Reed.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Yeah, I reached out to Dr. Reed in the spirit of collaboration. We had some questions from our parents during one of our open houses. And so I just really wanted to reach out to some community members to see, the best options moving forward, specifically around security and things of that measure. As a resident here in Anacostia, I'm very concerned with how we work with our community members in a way that is neither over policing or naive. And so, when I received that email, I really wanted to make sure that I took the time to really consider what it is we were actually trying to accomplish. And so what we hope to accomplish with Blue is to provide a small school where children can come and learn Montessori authentically. And because of that, we were able to garner significant responses in the lottery system. And then also I've been able to brush shoulders with my neighbors because the proposed location is literally 4/10 of a mile from my home. And everyone that I've had a conversation with said that they were pretty excited about it. And the person that put me in contact with Dr. Reed was very excited about it and thought that she would be a good thought partner on this process. So that's what I have to say about that. And again, we're happy to forward the email to you when we're finished.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I can just follow up on Vice Chair Salmon's question and also just the what Dr. Reed brings up in her email just around saturation. So one of the things that I'm keenly aware of, I'm a Ward 8 resident, ran schools in Ward 8, what the voice and community of our community looks like is very different than some of our competing wards that tend to be more vocal, more active, more that tend to look a little different. So as a result, when I do hear from I respect all officials. So let's just start there, everybody's important. But when I think about particularly in underrepresented or less vocal communities, where the voices have been marginalized, they have not been as open to being heard. When I do hear from the officials, I probably look a little closer. And just thinking, knowing the area, one, because I live here too, right? There are probably, in addition to the schools, where we know we've got a lot of schools everywhere, but there are particularly on that, which is now Marion Berry Boulevard, a lot of childcare centers, right? That are right there too, that would be in your same range. What's your response to the saturation part? I understand Wildflower and the micro school, but when you think about where you're locating in this part of the city, what is your response, or what was your response to Dr. Reed when she says, like, hey, there's a lot happening there already that's going on? What's your thought and response?
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. I think number one, I'm really excited to have a lot of learning opportunities in a particular space, especially because there's opportunities for us to partner together. One of the areas that I'm really excited about is the Anacostia Park and the Anacostia River. That's where my wife and I went on our first date. That's where I proposed to her. And so I would love to have a task force of schools maybe visiting the Anacostia Park, maybe even talking about ways that, we can ensure its viability, ways that our children can grow up to take care of that space. That's just one, space that I'm thinking that we can focus on together as a unit. Um, Additionally, with us being on Marionberry Avenue with some of the other schools, especially the childcare facilities, I've reached out to those childcare facilities to talk about, what it would be like for us to be there in that space, and then what it would be like for us to have conversations with those families. And so those childcare facilities, they were pretty open and honest about the fact that some parents do want their 3-year-olds to go to a schoolhouse. They were actually pretty excited to partner with us to talk to their families about these new opportunities. So again, I'm really excited about, a space that is really committed to serving children, a space that is really committed to helping them learn the tools that they need to be successful.
Okay. So I think the one thing that I would want to push you all to do, again, I am totally coming from a lens of a voice. The odds of you having a bunch of community members or businesses and things coming on this line to, give you feedback, it just looks very different east of the river. It simply does, particularly in Ward 8. So I don't want us to therefore, because that voice is not there, I want to make sure that we continue to elevate the concerns of saturation and the impact that we do have in communities as well. And so please continue to be in conversations with those organizations, right? Respecting legacy, respecting what has been there, and understanding how you play a role within the community, not just because you can be there, but whether or not you should be there and our impact of being there. I don't, and I'm really sensitive to it east of the river. I just really am, just because I know how this community operates. And I'm going to put that burden on you, Cliff and Jordan, to make sure that you and Rochelle, right, like holding them accountable, but they're going to be the ones on the ground. So, they're the ones
Yes. Absolutely.
To make sure that we are continuing to be good neighbors as you continue to do good things. I appreciate the work that Wildflower does and the innovative model that you carry. I know the focus of the school. I know the focus of the organization and why you all were founded. I also just want to make sure I want to make sure that we're being good neighbors, we're being mindful, particularly in a time and place where voices are a bit more marginalized. And what we know to be the truth, we should be, addressing and thinking about. So continue to do that outreach and continue to think about our impact in the city, and particularly just where you guys are going is very, you know where
it's super dense.
Right?
Yeah. I do want to share that we have had some interesting conversations both with folks on the PCSB staff who were trying to support us in thinking about the relationship with the ANC and just the neighborhood. And we have a plan to reach out to the bid to see if there's a way for us to offset some of whether it's in service or somehow in kind, to offset the impact of us being in the bid as a nonprofit. That was something we heard loudly from Chairwoman White, as well as thinking about partnerships with the other schools in the area around practice for preschool teachers and for the things that we, there are some things that we can learn, I'm sure, from other educators about preschool. And I know that Cliff and Jordan have information to share as well. And so hopefully we can get to a place of being collaborative and supporting each other as providers of preschool in the area, and not competitors, right? And don't want to be, we've tried very hard to not place ourselves directly in competition, right? So not going after somebody's feeder program. Because that's not a nice way to enter the community. So that is definitely, those are two things that we're very aware of. Thank you.
I have a question around the next school year.
Mhm.
If this is approved, so there are families that are already indicating interest in the lottery.
Yes.
If this is a facility and not a separate school.
Yes, we're considered one school with multiple facilities. So Blue will be a facility. And we have been able to, we've been able to take applications for that specific facility. And ironically, probably in part because Riverseed has been very successful. Enroll, those applications for Blue, if I can, when I share the deck, or I think Hannah, when Hannah shares the deck, you'll see I built an enrollment page in the back, so you could see that Blue has applications nearly as high as Riverseed's, even in their first year, in part because I think of the reputation.
Got it. Thank you for that. And just to clarify, so if a family is, or I guess the deadline's passed, was navigating the application,
Mhm.
it is indicated as a proposed location.
Yes. Yeah.
And then if they are matched, that they will be notified at some point by my school DC of when any kind of finalized location is.
Yes, we will match on the 29th, and then we have your vote in April. So I would imagine that either my school DC or we would reach out to confirm with folks that we will be at 1516.
Got it. Thank you. Hi, could you talk a little bit about your proposed renovation budget for your facilities and our material? It appeared as though the majority of your budget was going towards your existing facility, with about $100,000, if I'm reading this correctly, going towards the new facility. Can you talk about that breakdown? Can you talk about the work that you've done around the budget, and if there will be financing involved, and just sort of your endeavors in that area?
Sure. The larger amount that's in our existing budget, this current fiscal year budget, is actually money that's left over from our renovation of the Riverseed School. It was a big project, over $2 million. And we are working out the last bill with MCN Builds. So it's very high, but probably 80% of that 300,000 is going to go straight to MCN Build. And then in addition, we've had to do some additional work on that building. We had to update the sump pump. We've had to do some other small things that we didn't know at the time of the building. This is what happens when you purchase a 1920s, 1930s home. There's a lot of there are lots of things. The smaller budget, I think it's $110,000, is for renovation of the new space. And in fact, we're doing very little renovation. We're taking down a couple walls. We may put up a wall to make a vestibule. But the biggest piece of the work is actually HVAC and some changes to toilets and things to get to code for school. So that we currently do have the cash to get through that purchase. And that's our intention, is to use our cash on hand to get that work started as well in this fiscal year.
So the cash on hand piece is for the 110,000 for the new facility.
That's new facility, yeah. So the 3 something that is sitting, that is showing up as building improvement, is the old. I think I may be saying the wrong category, but the larger amount is actually money that is from the Riverseed School.
For the existing facility.
For the existing facility, yeah.
But that is correctly represented in the budget as funds that have to be paid. That's not something that you, okay. And so in terms of the 110,000, that will come from cash on hand, which is great. The money for the existing facility, what's the plan for that?
It also exists. It's money that we have been carrying in our budget.
Okay.
It was intended to be paid out if our build had gone as planned. we would have paid that out in the last fiscal year.
I see. So that money is tied to what
Mhm.
you've already done. I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay, thank you, Wildflower representatives, for joining us this evening. Seeking to find a facility and while opening a school is not easy. So thank you for coming before us. Thank you for the work that you have done to get to this point. We appreciate your service and look
Great.
forward
Thank
to
you.
hearing more next month.
Thank you all.
Wait, before you guys go, Mr.
Yes.
Campbell, what's your role?
Oh, he's my
Oh.
board chair.
I'm the chair of the board, so I did not feel the need to add to what Rochelle was saying. As I thought all three of them, I was just here in support of the work that our team is doing.
Okay, but the board feels comfortable and particularly around placement and location and the work that's happening to engage the community and so forth?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've Cliff and Jordan have been talking with us and working for talking with members of the board who have been giving advice for over a year now and have presented to us multiple times, including, the board now has parent board members that have had some great suggestions. And they've, been, we actually had a call on Friday and they were at the Riverseed School, as just to talk with the teacher leaders there and really learn from the experience they've had over the last couple of years. So we are excited about the potential for Blue.
Good, good. Well, thank you for your service to the charter community as well. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Everyone. All right, this concludes the public hearing portion of our agenda. Board members, may I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
I move that we approve this evening's agenda.
I second.
Confirming that we are approving the March 18th board meeting.
Confirmed.
Absolutely. I'm having a hard time hearing, but I think I heard you say do a roll call vote. So hopefully you can hear me and I'll begin. Chair Cruzy.
Aye. Here.
Vice Chair Sandman.
Aye.
Treasurer Wright.
Aye.
Board Member Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez.
He's had to step away.
Okay, very good. And I am Board Member Adam Afanian. I'm an aye.
Excellent. Thank you. Next on our agenda is a charter amendment request from the Mary McLeod Bethune Day Academy Public Charter School. And for that, I will yield the floor to Bijan Lane, Sector Planning and Compliance Specialist. And I would also like to invite representatives from the school to provide remarks regarding this amendment request, Dr. Linda McKay and Marcus McKay. Welcome back.
Should I get started while I wait for Dr. McKay? I just see Marcus.
They're on their way in.
Okay. Perfect. I see them both. Hello, my name is Bijan Lane. I am a specialist in the School Performance Department. DC PCSB staff recommend its board to vote to approve Mary McLeod Bethune Day Academy Public Charter School to relocate one of its two facilities. The school seeks to relocate from 5413 16th Street Northwest to Tacoma Park Baptist Church at 635 Aspen Street Northwest. The school has sought to relocate its 16th Street facility for the past 4 years to provide students, families, and staff with a better learning environment. The current 16th Street site is a basement lacking adequate space. DC PCSB received 31 written comments and testimony in favor for the request and 17 written comments and testimony against it. Advisory Neighborhood Commission 4B, which includes Tacoma Baptist Church, submitted a resolution letter against the proposed relocation. ANC 4B made several recommendations, including completing a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, with the Tacoma community. DC PCSB staff responded to each recommendation in the accompanying proposal, determining that the school has completed or made progress in each of these recommendations. For example, the school has shared a draft MOU and it presented the traffic study at a community meeting on March 14th, 2024. DC PCSB staff concludes that the school has met the facility standard for approval. Furthermore, as affirmed in its vision statement, DC PCSB believes that every DC student deserves a quality education. This relocation will likely improve Bethune's public charter school's ability to serve its students. If the board has any further questions, representatives from the school are available to answer them. Thank you.
Welcome back, Dr. McKay. I think you're on mute.
Pardon me. Yes, thank you so much for this second opportunity to speak before the board. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you, Bijan, for sharing with the board our progress that has been made since our last meeting. We have definitely had more engagement with the community. We commissioned a second transportation study. We've had more engagements with the local schools. And so we have garnered support from the community, from the neighbors, as well as engaged our parents and other stakeholders at Mary McLeod Bethune Day Academy, who are eagerly awaiting a new facility for our second campus in Ward 4.
Thank you, Dr. McKay. It sounds like it's been quite a busy last several weeks. As I understand it, it's not just been the last several weeks, however. Can you share with all of us here some of the longer journey that you have been on to find a suitable facility for your students?
Yes, you mean prior to seeking out Tacoma Park Baptist Church?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, okay. So in 2021, our search ended with us looking at a building. It was a school building, presently being housed as a daycare facility. It was a former DC public charter school building that was built and designed for that particular high school back in 2012. But that charter had closed, and we were able to find a building at First and Upshur. Our desire was to remain in close proximity with at least 1.5 miles from our current location at 16th and Kennedy Streets. So First and Upshur was excellent. We had the funds, we had a LOI, as well as verbal commitment to purchase. We had funding for the building, just on our way to purchase the building. And we were met with the owner of the building giving us a call stating that there was a problem with the contract that they had with the current resident. And so they were not able to sell us the building. And so we negotiated, and of course we had right to pursue, but we decided not to. And so since then, we continued to look for buildings. We found a location at the Walter Reed Estates, 2 fantastic mansions that we had met with the realtors and architects, and that again seemed like a fantastic location. It was within a gated community right down the street from DCI, or within the compound or campus. And in our due diligence, we were informed that because of historical preservation, some of the changes that we would have wanted to make it a fantastic building for our pre-K through grade 5 students, we weren't able to because of that Historical Preservation Act. And so again, we continued searching, and with our search, we had looked at some other buildings, but it's an extremely hard find, not only to purchase, but even to lease a facility that might be able to maintain a group of students. And our Northwest campus is a smaller campus than our Northeast Brooklyn campus, but it is one in which at the final, we want to have approximately 175 students. So in approximately 2 years ago, we did see that Tacoma Park was vacant, Tacoma Park Baptist Church. We met with the church leadership, and over the course of a year and a half, we met with them, different committees of the church. And then October 23rd, 2023, we received notification from the church that the membership had agreed, and this is after several engagements with the church. They agreed that we could be granted a letter of intent for lease of their education facility. So we were extremely happy. And since October 23rd, 2023, we have been diligently working to secure that facility.
Thank you for recapping that for us. Earlier this evening, we had a robust discussion on our proposed revised accountability framework, and I'm just trying to map out how old a student may have been in 2021 when that first attempt at an appropriate facility, so that if a child had been in 3rd grade then, if this facility is approved, it would open presumably next fall. Is that 20? So that child would be in 7th grade next year. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other board members, I have an additional thought to share, but want to welcome others.
Can you tell us what the status of the MOU is?
Yes, we received a draft of an MOU from ANC Palmer. And so we took that draft and developed a draft that would meet the needs of our community, of the school that we serve, the neighbors. And that has been delivered to Aaron Palmer. And in addition to that, we had a meeting and it has been sent out to neighbors in the neighborhood. I'm going to ask Marcus to speak a little bit more about the status of the MOU, but it has been delivered. It's in the hands of the ANC for continued negotiation, comments, edits, so that we can agree. We wanted to have a more definite understanding of the traffic study after we commissioned the second traffic study. And so some of those elements are built into the MOU.
Yeah, so I will just add, good evening, everyone. I will add that, as Dr. McKay stated, we have shared an initial draft of the MOU, but we will be soliciting feedback from community members as well as the ANC to further define the terms of that MOU. So we have, we will be accepting comments on via Google Docs document, and later host most likely a couple Zoom meetings to receive feedback from the community and work through coming to a definitive agreement with the community and our families.
Is my understanding correct that you received an initial draft of the MOU from the ANC?
No, so the ANC shared a similar MOU between a different community and a charter school to just serve as a
template. Yeah, it was not a draft per se, but it was a template of another charter school's MOU that we could work from.
And when did you provide your draft of the MOU back to the ANC?
That was February. No.
I believe it was March the 7th.
Okay.
And have you heard anything back from the ANC?
We did receive an email stating that she had received it. And at this point, we're waiting to hear more. But neighbors have received it also, and we have planned additional Zoom meetings. And the document is in a Google Doc form so that we can solicit comments and any edits, suggestions.
Thank you.
So I just want to say, it was good to see the level of engagement that you all have done with the community and the different activities. While I understand that Vice Chair Salmon is asking about the MOU, I do just want to note for the record that that is not something that PCSB is requiring of you or would have oversight of. So just want to make sure that everyone is clear for the record that that is not a requirement of ours or something that we would get involved in. If that is something that you all choose to do as a LEA with your community, that is definitely your choice, but that is not part of our current bar or expectations for meeting this, our policy and our standard for movement.
Thank you.
Could you talk a little bit about enrollment and the demonstration of need for the additional facility, given what I read here is that there was decreased enrollment from FY21 to FY23, while you did see an increase in 24, but I'd like to hear your thoughts about enrollment and as such, the demonstration of need for the additional facility.
Yes. So let me just say it's not an additional facility, it's a relocation of a current facility. And that is a pre-kindergarten through grade 5. At that time, it was a pre-K through grade 3 because we were building that enrollment. The decrease in enrollment was really reflective of the pandemic. During and immediately after the pandemic, early childhood enrollment decreased significantly in public schools because at the time, DC was providing free daycare to parents from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And also, parents had decided they were going to either stay home with their children or find what they considered safer, healthier environment because of the pandemic. So that was a reason why you saw the decrease in enrollment, and in 23-24 you saw an increase.
That makes sense to me. I was one of those parents myself, so thank you for that. And then can you talk a little bit about the improvements that you're going to make to the building, what that will look like, and how you intend to fund those improvements?
Yes, I'm going to let Marcus talk about the improvements, but first I just want to say that we have a very healthy and robust budget at the time, and Marcus will talk about the financing as well as improvements to the existing building. But I do want you to remember one of the parents who gave public comments said she would be happy when her child is out of the basement. Since our inception at the 16th and Kennedy Street campus, which actually began in 2004 when we first opened, but we only remained there until 2009, and we came back in 2017. But it has been rife with flooding, small space. It is in the basement, so it can become damp. It is not large. It's not a large building, but we have made extreme improvements in the facility to make it a very healthy, happy place for children. So Marcus, can you just share now about the improvements that are in the works? And I'm sure he's going to talk about the good state of the facility as it is now. But of course, we do have to make some improvements to meet health and safety standards.
Marcus, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. So at the new facility, we will be modernizing the facility. We'll be starting with Great Bones. The educational building was built in 1951, very solid construction, already divided into classrooms, and we'll mostly be modernizing the facility and making accessibility upgrades to include a new elevator, all ADA accessible restrooms features. We'll, of course, addressing cosmetics, new wiring, electricity, plumbing upgrades, new playground. But we definitely have a great starting point. One other thing is making upgrades to the HVAC system. So the building is currently air conditioned, but we will be adding additional ventilation to meet today's fresh air requirements, especially post-COVID, circulating fresh air throughout the building.
And I read that you're going to finance a big chunk of that. How can you talk about those efforts? Have you started speaking with lenders? Have you started to have conversations about that?
Yes, we have. So we are working with our current bank, M&T Bank, and we have a very good relationship. They are very interested in financing the project. One thing that they are waiting on for the next step is the approval of the charter board tonight. So we are looking forward to furthering those conversations in the next couple of days.
And so you've just had conversations with your existing bank to date?
Yes. So we've received prior funding commitments from them.
Okay.
And we're very confident that they will finance the project.
Yeah, I just want to say that this is the same bank and the same relationship we've had when we were working to purchase the Upshur Street building as well as the Walter Reed building.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading the room, and colleagues, if we have no further questions, I will now entertain a motion.
I move to approve the charter amendment request of Mary McLeod Bethune Day Academy Public Charter School and approve the DC PCSB board chair to sign the amendment on the board's behalf.
I'll second.
Thank you. Secretary Admafanian, would you mind taking a roll call vote?
Yes. Chair Cruzy?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Sandman?
I'm going to vote no. And I'd like to give a brief explanation for why. DC law requires that our board assign great weight to the issues and concerns that are raised in an ANC's recommendations. The state of the record before us now is that the ANC is opposed to this relocation. I don't see anything in the record that indicates that they've changed their view. I don't think, for me, I'm not yet at a point that I can say that the school has complied with the standard, which requires making a reasonable and documented effort to engage its internal community and the community groups located in the area surrounding the proposed space. I just don't think you're there yet. I understand the timing of this decision. I understand that you need a decision to be able to make the renovations that are required for the space and for families to know where their students might be in the fall. But I don't think that can override the legal requirement that we give great weight to the views of the Advisory Neighborhood Commission. I vote no.
Thank you. Treasurer Wright.
Aye.
Board member Carissa Stanley Beatty. Board member Beatty, Stanley Beatty. Are you all, hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, that was a pause. I'm gonna go on mute. I'm sorry.
I can hear you.
It's late, y'all. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I was speaking not in my microphone. I was noting to Board Chair Cruzy that I have a concern that I would like clarification on from a procedural perspective in light of Board Sandman's vote.
Okay, please go ahead and state your question.
Is it accurate I understand it's accurate that we give great weight to the ANC's recommendations, period. Is it staff's understanding that the LEA has met that recommendation?
Thank you, Board Member Beatty. So our proposal is that Bethune has met our standard of approval. We did submit in the proposal, and I would like either Bijan or Hannah Cousineau to say more here if the board has additional questions. We did submit in the proposal response to each of the recommendations of the ANC and our assessment of whether or not the LEA how the LEA responded to those recommendations. So we believe that we have given consideration to the ANC's position and have appropriately responded to each of those recommendations or requests of the ANC. So I would appreciate if either Bijan or Hannah Cousineau could add anything there, but yes, we are providing the board with a recommendation for approval based on our assessment of the LEA meeting our standard of approval.
And just a quick additional piece is unpack a little bit about how staff have interpreted great weight. Welcome back, Hannah. You're on mute.
Okay, I can jump on in here. So thank you for your question and concern. But yes, so as you know, we were set to originally vote on this proposal in February. However, we did postpone it to today so that we can give more time to Bethune. And so in that time, they have improved drastically with their community engagement. For an example, they've been able to do walkthroughs with the ANCs, also with community members as well. They've also hosted a ice cream social with members from the Tacoma Park community as well. They've completed a updated and new traffic study, which was requested in the resolution letter. as well as that we did ask what they're going to do for future engagement. And part of concerns raised by the ANC is creating a group of a team, a task force, a team with members from Bethune, the ANC, and community members to get their insight on how to bridge that gap. And so based on that, we did take what was written in the resolution letter from their recommendations. We responded to it with updates, as well as the updates that I'm giving you now. But based on that evaluation, they have passed our standard for approval.
Thank you for that, Bijan. I have a note from to build on that, from our general counsel that explains that great weight requires us to consider each recommendation with specificity and respond to it in writing. We have to articulate our reasoning with specificity, which I think is another way of saying what you've just said.
Correct. We responded to that in the proposal. It's in our table there.
And Chair Cruzy, if I may, I want to make a distinction. We have a standard of approval for facility amendment request, and part of that standard of approval is to give great weight to the ANC. So I want to make sure that both are on the record that we did follow our standard of approval, and in responding to the ANC resolution, we provided that detailed response as our general counsel shared.
With that, we still have an open motion. And we can go to another board member if you want.
I vote aye.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then I am an aye.
Okay.
Did board member Rodriguez submit a proxy?
He did not.
Got it. Thank you.
He had to step away. Okay. With that, Mary McLeod Bethune community, congratulations. It sounds like the ayes do have it. I'd just like to offer that, as with any matter that impacts neighborhoods, decisions around schools can raise or activate tensions with different stakeholders. Unfortunately, there has been a tendency to view charters as infringing on neighborhoods or neighborhood schools, despite their long history here in the district to provide families with meaningful options and alternatives when families are interested in a program offering that is not offered by their neighborhood school. And just encourage those who may feel such tensions to always ground their concerns first in the humanity and dignity of the students who are deserving of a safe and quality learning environment, and to honor the dignity of the leaders who deliver a quality education that makes their students feel valued, puts them on a path to lifelong learning, fulfilling careers, and economic stability. So thank you very much for this conversation this evening, and board members and staff for your involvement to.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is a charter amendment request from Washington Latin Public Charter School. For that, I yield the floor to Bijan Lane, Sector Planning and Compliance Specialist. Welcome back, Bijan. Thank you for not leaving. I would also like to invite representatives from the school to provide remarks regarding this amendment request. Welcome back, Peter Anderson, and welcome, Mr. Ken Merritt. I saw you at the last board meeting. Welcome back.
Perfect. I see them both. Hello again. DC PCSB staff recommends its board to vote to approve Washington Latin Public Charter School's request to relocate one of its two facilities. The school seeks authorization to relocate the Anna Julia Cooper Campus Middle School and the yet-to-be-opened Anna Julia Cooper Campus High School from 711 Edgewood Street Northeast to 4301 Harwood Road. If approved, the relocation will take place ahead of school year 2025-26. If the board has any further questions, representatives from the school are available to answer them. Thank you.
Welcome back, Washington Latin. Do you have updates for us from the last board meeting on traffic reports, construction advances, otherwise, community engagement?
Thank you for considering our charter amendment application this evening, and good evening once again. Since the last meeting, we have continued to engage our community. As you know, we collaborated with Washington U Ying in a very extensive community engagement process. We had a traffic study that was commissioned and that was in place before the last time we came before the PCSB board, so we don't have an update to that. There's no new study because we've already completed one, but we've continued to engage with our neighbors. As you know, we were in a temporary space. We'll be at full capacity next school year when we were at grades 5 through 8. And just to remind everyone, we purchased a property that will enable us to serve grades 5 through 12. So both the existing Anna Julia Cooper campus middle school and a yet to be opened Anna Julia Cooper campus upper school, which will allow our students to learn and grow in a much larger facility, one better suited to a robust learning environment. And it will offer myriad opportunities for us to be an asset in the community. You asked about construction. We have right now, we have not broken ground. There is construction that started with Washington U Ying in September, and they have continued their construction. And we'll be continuing that construction until the end of the summer. We have not yet broken ground.
Sounds like you may have a busy months ahead of you.
Yes, but bear in mind that we, we're not anticipating opening until the fall of 2025, 2026.
Okay. Board members, do we have any follow-up questions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the charter amendment request of Washington Latin Public Charter School and approve the DC PCSB board chair to sign the amendment on the board's behalf.
I'll second.
Thank you. Secretary Adamafania, could we take a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Chair Cruzy,
Aye.
Vice Chair Sandman,
Aye.
Treasurer Wright,
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez is absent. Board Member Carissa Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
I am an aye. The ayes have it.
All right, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate this.
And thank you for your patience this evening. It's been a long night.
Thank you. It was well worth it. Thank you.
Board members, is there any new business? Then I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the March 18, 2024 board meeting.
I'll second.
One last roll call vote, please.
Sorry. Chair Cruzy,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jim Sandman.
Aye.
Okay, Zoe, it's all right.
We all hear that? Oh, great. Treasurer Wright.
Aye.
Board Member Rodriguez is absent. Board Member Carissa Stanley Beatty.
Aye.
And I am an aye.
Along with Zoe.
Yes, the ayes have it.
Thank you for the full communities that have been around to be patient for us tonight. Appreciate you. Good night,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. Good night.
Night. Thank you.